Hey Alexis, long time no see.
Hey DP, how's it going?
It's going. We got a few folks kind of tuning in, so as we always do, definitely make a point to comment below your branch of service and the years that you served. Today we're going to have a discussion, as you may have seen, about our paths to getting a service dog and living with one. We had a great conversation a few days ago in light of what was been happening in the world. So I'll let Alexis kind of introduce herself for those that didn't catch us. If you didn't, go back a few days, you'll see the special that we did. But Alexis, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey everyone, I'm Alexis Lodge. I am an Army veteran. I served from 2010 to 2013, deploying to Afghanistan. I did human intelligence collection, and I'm now a Master of Social Work candidate at Fordham University in New York City.
Awesome, awesome. Let me see here. Whoop, make sure that they can hear. Fordham. I'm from New York originally, so I know exactly where that's at.
Yeah,
We have a
sure.
few folks popping in saying hello. So as you guys kind of pop in, we'll bring up your comments.
Uh-uh.
This is probably the only time where you don't have to tell who you just told to be quiet because this is about them today. Where is my? I might as well get it out of the way now before it gets too far ahead. I have what I called my little. Where is it? My little legend cam. So he is here next to me. So my service dog is taking a little break right now. So it's funny because we get used to always kind of doing something, and it's always kind of like, don't make too much noise or whatever the case may be. However, this is definitely the day where I guess they can get a pass. So
For sure.
this is little Legicam, as you can see here on top of my screen, and he's taking a break. So he's like, "All right, you do your stuff. I'm gonna take a break here. Come back to me later." So
He
we
had a
put
hard day,
well,
hard work.
keeping up with me is definitely a hard day. So thanks for another. We have another jarhead jumping in saying hello. Let's see here. We have Colorado Springs in the house saying howdy. We have, let's see, Yellen's here saying hello. Um, Brian Lofton says, great seeing you all. Great topic for many veterans that don't know. Eric, USMC from Virginia, says, hello. Hey, what's going on, my brother? Glad to have you here. Glad to see you here. Lisa, let me know if the gain is better now. So, testing out a new mic to see how that kind of comes across. But awesome. So, yeah, having a great conversation today, to say the least, which should be interesting. A few things, I guess, for everyone. We met, me and Alexis, on Clubhouse. That's kind of one of the things we've been talking about here for the past few days. And it's interesting to kind of mention that because there's a few things in turn that I think should be mentioned here. One, namely that when it comes to this new application, right, it's literally something new. A lot of folks don't know about it. Some folks might think that it's, a fad or think that it's just, whatever. However, Alexis and I were able to literally meet on the app. We came together, had a conversation. Had a veterans group together in there, and really kind of just talked right about mental health. And the interesting thing is to meet someone else who also has a service dog. So when most people think of a service dog, you kind of think of a man, you think of a veteran, right? But you don't really think of a woman with a service dog. So we'll just kind of go, to the genesis here in a second. But the big question is, how is life, before we get to kind of how we got here, today, presently for you as a woman with a service dog, which I'm sure for many, it's like, what is going on here?
Right. It's great. It's great. My quality of life has enhanced since having hope. And it's been an amazing experience. I've been very humbled by the amount of help and support I've received from friends and family. But it's been great. She comes to school with me when we go to school. I'm remote right now, but when we were in school, she came to school with me. When I was doing my internships and my field practicums in person, she was coming there with me. She's been everywhere from Yankee Stadium to Lincoln Center to see Broadway plays. I mean, we've done so much together that has been, you know, life changing experiences, super remarkable, memorable experiences. And all of that is because I have her. Certainly, these were not things that I was doing prior to having Hope. I was not. I wasn't leaving the house. So yeah.
So, needless to say, you probably get a few looks and probably maybe some questions, but not so many, which I think is interesting, right?
Well, it's all about the environment. Let's be honest. It depends on where you are. If I am in, more suburban area walking my big Labrador looking dog, that's not so surprising. But if I am in downtown Manhattan with a large breed dog, yeah, I'm definitely getting some looks and some questions. People are very confused about what is this,
Who are you
young lady
training him
doing.
for? Is it
Yeah,
yours? He's so cute.
that's
She's so
number one
cute.
question. Yeah, he's so cute. And who is he for? And when will he go to his owner? So on and so forth. So there's a lot
One
of
for me, two a she, three. Thank you for asking.
yeah. So there's a lot of kind of mystifying that there are women veterans with service dogs. But yes, the presumption tends to be that I'm training her for somebody else.
Mm. So let's go back to to Genesis. First of all, let's look at just our pathways to even getting a service dog. So when did
Mhm.
you come to the point where you kind of decided, like, how did you get there, right? So I'll let you share your story, then I'll kind of talk about mine as far as before we even began to search. Then we'll talk about our organizations that we use, the process of how we got there, and then we'll kind of come back to present as of life right now, right, with a service dog, and we'll take some questions as well. So let's go right back to the beginning. When did you even come to a place where you thought, how did that spark even begin of Alexis may be looking at, I may look into a service dog? When did that become something for you?
Maybe sometime in early 2014, my mom suggested it to me. It was a discussion that she had had with my sister. My sister actually suggested that maybe Alexis should get a service dog, and that's something that my mom discussed with me. So that was maybe early 2014. Um, and it was just a discussion. It was something like, yeah, that's a cool idea, but no thanks at the time, and something I'd shelved for a while. But as I continued to really struggle with my mental health and getting back on track, and to be frank with you, as I became more desperate, I started to consider more options, right? So when I started thinking about maybe I need inpatient treatment, maybe I need this, maybe I need that, as it became what I felt more extreme, the types of things I was looking for, I became more willing to consider getting a service dog. So maybe early 2014. Fast forward to late 2015, end of 2015, early 2016. Yeah, probably early 2016. I actually, bit the bullet and decided to fill out the application for Hope. So that wasn't even necessarily that I was guaranteed to get a dog. I had just decided that I would apply to be considered to get a dog. Right. And so that was a really hard decision to make because I just wasn't sure that this was going to be something that would, number one, help me, and number two, that I really wanted to do. Right? Did I want to walk around with something that advertises to people that I'm not the same as you? So it took me a long time to kind of arrive at that conclusion. Um, but once I did, I was again met with even more anxiety, right, and more tension awaiting, in the waiting process. Um, and so it was really tough. It was a really tough
Let me
time.
ask you real quickly. What were you just looking down at?
Hope is what is that noise?
No,
So
it's
yeah,
funny. No, I interject that because for those watching, right, it's one of those things where I'll do stuff, and every so often you see that because it's like oh, he's still there. So it's funny just to see see someone else doing the same exact thing. Where as soon as you look down, I know exactly what you're doing. Right, you're doing your thing, you're talking, you're here, and it's kind of like yes, one, two, three, okay, we're good, and off you go. Because I don't know about Hope, but I can tell you that Legend is a pseudo ninja. So sometimes he knows how to kind of sneak away and low crawl sometimes. So every so often I kind of see a little flicker on my side. It's a little bit easier because he's a yellow lab. But so I thought that was just something to call out for those out there that may have been wondering. When you see me do it, that's what that is.
and these are the habits that you develop that you don't even realize you have. That kind of constantly checking for your dog is something that you'll find yourself doing, even though I know she's right here, right? So I'm in my bedroom, the door is closed, there's only but so far that she can go. She's on her bed, but I'm still constantly checking. I hear noise. Okay, what is she doing? What is she up to? um, and I guess that speaks to kind of this codependency, right? This kind of healthy codependency that we create with our dogs. um, so yeah.
So that's amazing. So you served, you were in the military. This is really to focus the fact that both of us we serve. There are things you experienced, things you saw, things you were exposed to. The point is, we come to a point in our lives after service of we're dealing with things, right? That's really what the emphasis for today is really about. So I'll say, to kind of catch up on my side, same thing. And there's something interesting you said, which I think highlights for the viewers, which is a support system. It comes in many different ways. You mentioned who kind of brought the idea to you. It was not my idea to get a service dog. It was my wife's idea. She was the one that said you should look into getting a service dog. But before that, right, you go and just figure I'm fine. I don't have to, look into anything or do anything. I can Google a thing or self, care, or I'm fine, right? Suppress it, put it away, because right, these things will go away by themselves. But then over time, things take a different turn. So enter the VA, enter therapy, enter different modalities. You check the
Mm.
box, you tried this, that didn't work, nor did the other. And it's one of those things of like, what's the right combination? Because for some, a combination of, let's say, medication and therapy may work. For others, it may not work. So I guess that's the part that no one really puts a face to, where everyone's path and journey is different. For me, maybe all I need is group therapy. Maybe for you, you need something else. So everybody you have. So I would say is encouraging and trying different things to find the recipe that works for you. What do you think about that? Because again, given the fact that Alexis is also moving into this specialty personally, every so often as we're talking, right, we'll kind of jump out and kind of make a point. So I think this is one of those good points to touch on from the point of just looking at different avenues, regardless of where you're at right now. Just using our stories as that. What would you say to that, Alexis, on your end?
I think it's so important to approach it that way. Like many other things, we want to approach it with a multifaceted attack, right? And I think it's important that we try different modalities to find the right thing, because what works for you, DP, very well may not work for me. And what I'm successful at and what I find is a good routine or a good regimen for me may not be for you or for anybody else. And so I think it's important to continuously try new things, new modalities if what you're doing isn't working for you, but definitely trying more than one thing at a time, right? Therapy is great. Therapy with medication is awesome, or medication is great, but medication with therapy and maybe a service dog is awesome, or maybe equine therapy, or maybe swimming, or maybe going to the gym. All of these kinds of combined things that help us to achieve better wellness are really what we should be attempting to do. And I think it's really important that we try. There are a plethora of services that are available to us as veterans. I think it's important that we know how to access them or how to find them. I know that you and I are going to get into the organizations that we both worked with, but this was some research on my end, right? I had to look into service dogs, and then when I found like, hey, there's service dogs are out there for veterans, then it became finding the right kind of organization for
Mm-hmm.
me, going to be the
So
best
you
fit for my
went to the Googling machine, and literally it is all these organizations.
there was a lot of organizations, and a lot of them approach service dogs in very different ways, and approach their training to service dogs in different ways, approached acquiring the dogs in different ways, and they approach your training as a handler in different ways. And so that was what was the biggest I think deciding factor for me at the time, was how were they going to prepare me to have a service dog, because what do I do? I just show up and get a dog and
Mm-hmm.
like I walk
Which
out.
highlights a great point though. So let's go to the genesis of why we're even here. So
Right.
when Alexis and I spoke about this, there was other things I was looking to do. We're putting together a panel where I'm going to convene the director of the organization that I worked with. Alexis is going to try to get a representative from her organizations, bring a psychiatrist, bring a medical provider, and basically make a point to really talk about this from different angles, right? Because we have service animals, emotional support animals. Some are medical alert animals. Some are seeing eye dogs. So there's a variety. This whole space is very deep. So we're just seeing two different stories here that are similar, but at the same token will develop or open up how different they are. But I think it's key to note that to bring to speed. So we're at the point where Alexis has got to the Google machine. I, in turn, Same thing. The wife kind of brings it up. I'm thinking to myself, okay, whatever. Go to Google. Same exact thing. And like anything else, we'll talk about how that application part went, because I think it's good to talk about that. But even getting to the point of looking into this, I don't know about you, Alexis, but the first thing I begin to do is to start to YouTube things. Let me look into what this is. And I was met with so many videos of teenage girls and their service dog, and it was literally nothing I could relate to. So I'm sitting there like, wait a second, I don't really see a lot of information that relates to me. One, as a veteran, two, as an adult. So there
Right.
are some things, but just it was just kind of piecemealing things here and there. When you began this process, how was your search when you began looking into things?
So listen, DP, let me tell you, I'm a big researcher. And when I get into things, when I find that I'm interested in things, I get really obsessive. And so when I was thinking about this service dog thing, right? So after I had applied, so the application is sent. Now it's what does life, now what do I do?
Hmm.
So if I'm going to follow through with this, because at this point I was still like, I don't really have to do it, right? All I've
Right,
done is
right.
apply. So I am scouring the internet. I mean, I've called a library to see if they had books on living with service dogs. I'm looking at Barnes and Noble, right? And I have access. So I live in a pretty big city, so I have access. So I'm thinking like, hey, if there's any place where I can find a book on this, whether it's an independent bookstore, whether I have to go into the city and find it, I'm going to find information and material on living with a service dog. Um, and the fact is, it just doesn't really exist aside from what you highlighted, YouTube. And YouTube is super helpful in terms of training your animal and what living with the service dog looks like for certain demographics, but certainly not as adults, certainly not as veterans. And also not as people who maybe came to be disabled in different ways. There's a lot of people who are suffer from chronic illnesses, who have service animals, but not necessarily people who came to acquire invisible illnesses. So yeah, there wasn't a lot of information at all. And I think you and I, when we talked on Clubhouse, you and I mentioned the same YouTuber, the same kind of young lady
Yes.
who she same thing, has chronic illness and has a service animal. I think her partner, I think her husband is actually a veteran. But that was it. And I watched, I mean, all of her videos. She
Same.
posted on a regular basis. I watched all of her old videos. I mean, everything that she had posted.
Going to Disney World, life at the park, doing this, and you're just
Grocery store. What is life like in Florida with a dog? I
and
mean,
those are the small details. Because I'll just mention Felix. I see your question, and we're gonna get to that here in a second. For questions about things, but some of those little intricate things of what does life even look like in the day to day. So I want to interject here one quick point. I am married and I have three children. And again,
mhm,
this is good to make this comparison because you'll see the differences in our backgrounds. On your side of the house, you're not married and you don't have any children, so you're single, living by yourself with a service dog, correct? In New
that's
York
right.
City, might we add, which adds a whole nother level of things.
Right.
So, on my side, married, three children, teenagers, and then two, in the 11 and 9 bracket. So that in and of itself creates a lot of questions of what is life with a service dog in a family setting? What is life with a service dog as a single woman in New York City? Going to school, going to graduate school, becoming a professional in your trade. Which, for one, I just have to also highlight how much I respect and commend what you're doing, because not only are you a veteran, a service dog, but you chose to go into the mental health field to try to help out others who you can relate to. So that creates a level of integrity and tangibility and credibility that you don't really see with a lot of therapists. I can tell you, you've seen them. You go to therapy, you try to find someone you can connect with and bond with, and it's hard if they don't understand your journey of what brought you through those doors. So I think there's a lot of boxes that you check, which I think in and of itself is amazing. As we proceed and do work and you begin to establish your business and so forth, we'll have that available for those of you that may be watching should you reach out. So one thing to know for admin rules, definitely make a point to like this, to share it, head on over to the YouTube channel. And the reason we're saying this, because many individuals, we've found that while we're very successful on Facebook, it's just hard to get folks on Facebook. Whereas with YouTube, it's easier to watch. That said, the algorithm looks at interaction. It looks at, are you people interacting with what you're doing? So we want to get this message out there. making a point to interact with in the community is huge for that. But we will also be documenting and journaling rather, Alexis's journey as she begins and continues and finishes her studies, because many of you may obviously have questions. So even though you may not be here live watching this and might be on a replay, we're still going to be in the comments. We're still going to reach out. We're going to have other episodes and other things we'll do. But this is the initial conversation just to kind of introduce that. So we're to the point where you're single in New York City. I'm married with children. That's kind of our life, right? So you get to the point where you're ready to apply, and you kind of narrow it down. You looked online, I looked online, couldn't find anything. So you finally narrow down your organization. Walk me
That's right.
through your process and the application, because that's a whole other thing. And then I'll chime in with kind of when I narrow down my process, and we'll kind of compare notes. And we've never talked about this, which is the good thing
Right.
about having a conversation. So I'm curious, how was your application interview process up until the point of getting accepted?
Well, let's start. It was a 30-page application. It may be longer now, but I'm not exaggerating. It was a 30-page application. And I had been in contact with the organization before, asking questions, reaching out to the warrior trainers. So I don't think they were necessarily shocked to see my application slide across the desk. I had been in contact before. So I completed that application, which was extensive, which talked about, where I live, what type of environment I live in. Do I live in a city? Do I live in a house? Do I live in an apartment? Do I travel a lot? Am I active? Do I like to climb mountains? Am I a couch potato? What are my mobility needs, right? What are things like that? So all of these types of things for them to be able to consider, number one, my issues and my needs. Well, let me back that up. This program is, number one, a program that serves veterans who have either post-traumatic stress disorder, military sexual trauma, or traumatic brain injuries, right? So they've already kind of funneled you into those three categories, so you know whether or not you're eligible. So I applied because I have PTSD. And so I
Oh, there we
completed
go.
the app. There we go. What a great website. So I completed the application, and I waited. Waited. They finally reached out. I had, I believe, a brief interview, and then I received a letter in the mail, several weeks later, that had been accepted. But when I received my letter that had been accepted, I believe we were in, let's say, May 2016, and my acceptance was for August 2017. So I had a ways to go. And so at that point, that's when the really intensive research began, of scouring the internet and looking for what it might look like for me to now, like, live with this dog and have to go places with this dog, and how do you go on an airplane with the dog, and things like that.
So,
Um,
so, so we're to the point where you've identified the location. You went through the interview process. You had an interview. What did the interview process? Was it one session or different sessions that you have to provide documentation as to your own therapy and things that you were doing as part of the application
so
process?
the application process was very, what's the word I'm looking for? It was very complete in terms of the application. So pretty much all of that stuff that you are looking to address was addressed in the application
Good.
phase, and in the application material itself. And part of the application was documentation verifying your diagnosis, verifying that you are in treatment for your disabilities,
Hmm.
things of that
Did you have to
nature.
get a letter from your therapist to submit with the application, or just or
My
reference
letter was
them?
Yeah, my letter was from my psychiatrist, I
Oh, I'm saying
believe.
rather, but so you did get a letter and submit with your application.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. So that was part of
Yeah,
the whole application process. So
correct.
to even be considered, you had to submit that with the application.
Gotcha.
So yes, all of that was included. So yeah, it was a really comprehensive assessment in terms of me as a candidate, my temperament. I believe there was reference checks. They wanted to know if I had previously had to rehome a dog.
Hmm.
Um, you know, they wanted to know about the environment of the home. What does my apartment look like? What's the square footage? You know what I mean? Are there children in my home? So things you think you're just going to, hey, I want this dog and I want to get this service dog and I have PTSD. So, like, can I get
Hmm.
it now? That's not how it works. They want to know, do you have a partner? How many kids do you have? How big is your house? Do you have a pool? Is your yard fenced in? Do you travel? Do you have an active lifestyle? Do you have mobility issues? Things of that nature, because we'll get into this later, I'm sure, but they're also thinking at this time what type of temperament dog that they're going to match you with, right?
Yeah.
So I am not a incredibly active person. I do not climb mountains every weekend. I am not.
What you mean? You're not in New York City climbing mountains?
No, I'm not. But there are people who are, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
it's if they get a dog that matches that lifestyle and that energy level, it wouldn't be really appropriate for me to have a super active, maybe German Shepherd or something of that nature. And I live in New York City and we're not having this active lifestyle. So all of these things are considered. And then again, I guess what I didn't mention is all of this happens, you get accepted. You can wait, your time frame. When you get there, you go through this assessment again, right? And this time you're actually meeting with somebody who is an expert in partnering dogs with and
Mm-hmm.
working dogs with their handlers. Again, this was several years ago for me, but the gentleman that I worked with actually worked at one of the U.S. embassies working with bomb dogs and their handlers, and he had over 30 years of experience. So this is who's interviewing you, asking you questions, following up with you to find out if anything has changed in your lifestyle, and
And I think
then
that's key there too. That I want to highlight and just kind of just give a little moment for everyone watching that the credibility of the organization you're looking into when you're doing this homework, right? What is the background? How long have they done this? What is their status in the organizations? There's all those details you want to do, especially if they're, let's say, a nonprofit. You want to
Mhm.
know, right? What does they even look like? Because again, it's easy to say you do something versus actually doing that thing. That can change a lot of things for many individuals. So I just want to just kind of highlight the fact that doing your due diligence to the organization and you starting to hear that, I think it's key to catch up with where you're at right now. On my side, I'll tell you, it was exactly the same thing, pretty much exactly the same thing. So on my side of the house, I went through MK9S service dogs. So that's it's a similar program. It's a little bit different how they execute it, but I think it's just awesome to be able to touch on this, and we'll come back to that here again. But and that was actually some pictures of Legend. Um, when I made a decision to apply, I actually applied to an organization, and they were like, "Here's the application. It's going to take about a year or two to even be considered." Right. So same thing. It was about a 30-page document. When you kind of take the plunge to do this, I'll tell you what. In my case, at least, I had filled out the application anyway before they even said, "Hey, you can apply." They weren't even taking applications. Um, my journey was very, very unique. This does not happen with anyone, and very few people can say this. For me, it took a while to make the decision to look into this. That
Mhm.
said, when I finally made a decision to do this, what ended up happening was the organization I had first reached out to was booked, but there was basically one of the lead trainers there began their own corporation. So literally, you had an established corporation that where now the other Michelle started her own organization, and literally my application was like one of the first ones in the chute. So the
Okay, wow.
backlog wasn't there. So literally,
Right.
I kid you not, I apply in December, and a week later, so it was like a two-part application series to screen you and then
Mhm.
ask for more. Same thing, financial fitness, where do you live, background, letter from your therapist, all those type of things that you need to be able to satisfy that. Um, and I submit part one. I'm thinking it'll be a while. I'm just happy to get the application out. Mind you, when I reached out, they said Michelle emails me and says, "Well, here's the application that you need." I said, "Well, fun fact, I actually just filled out the whole thing already. So here's part one. I'll
Right.
hear from you when I hear from you." She goes, "Well, that's
Right.
pretty quick. Well, here's part two." I said, "Well, okay, that's pretty cool." And literally, my process took all of a week just to get
Wow.
accepted because of the fact that it was literally the wait list and all that. I already had everything kind of ready to go. But
Right.
it was a very extensive application. Let's make no mistake about it. All that had to
Right.
be in there. I had to do an interview. So I had to literally go for an interview with my spouse. We had to have a conversation, right? Temperaments, all these different things. There was a therapist at the meeting as well to be able to verify some of these things and have a conversation. And then, because I have a family, there was also a suitability test for the house. So they actually had to come to the house to check to make sure that it was a safe environment for the service dog. And I had to have the conversation, which is part of the interesting part of this, with my children. So
Right.
understand now that for me, it's not just I applied for something. Now I have to have a conversation at the time with a 7 year old and a 9 year old and a 15 year old, 14 year old, and say pretty much, this is
Yeah.
what dad is looking at doing. There's potentially a puppy coming here that we're acquiring, but this is not going to be, the family pet. This is different, right? This is a service dog for dad. Of course, people know what a service dog is, but they have to explain to your children, well, this is going to help me deal with my disabilities, and there's different things. So, Alexis' point, you have invisible wounds. Some service dogs are trained for psychiatric support and mobility. So, it's a variety of things, and that's where the application is handy as to what do you need. You may need something for mental health, you may need something for mobility. So, it depends, and that's part of the screening process to make sure you're paired with someone. But I want to stop there and kind of bring it back to you on your side, Alexis, but just to look at the difference but similarities of how our journey was as far as the application, doing the research, and my side, because I had a kid, having to have the conversation and having to explain, to a 7-year old that, dad has PTSD, this is what we're doing. And then she turns around and says, well, do I have PTSD too? No, this
Right,
is not like a genetic thing. So
right.
from there, back to you, now you've been accepted. So what begins to happen after that for you?
So it's a long waiting process for sure. And in the waiting process, I did as much research as possible. But to be honest, not much happens in this phase for me because there's not much to be done. There's not any books to read.
Hmm.
All YouTube videos have been watched, right? Um, I don't know very many people with a service dog, and there's hope. The people who I do know, or the acquaintances or the friends of friends who I know with service dogs, I've already picked their brains, right? But again, these are people with different disabilities who have different needs than me and have had different experiences. So I got as much information as possible in terms of like having a service dog. But I still kind of didn't really know what to expect. And the organization, of course, is always there. You can call them anytime. There's always somebody to talk to and answer your questions.
Very, very supportive. Very supportive. I'll give them that.
Extraordinarily. However, this is one of those things that you don't really know what you're getting into until you experience it. You don't know what it's like until you experience it. And there's now I know, there's not too many ways that you could prepare aside from, I think, viewing content like this, right? So discussions like what was it like to get one? And then after I got one, what did my life look like? I wish that I had seen that information. And that's what I was looking for during this period, right? So during this period of acceptance of, okay, I'm going to do this. What happens? Or what does it look like now?
Yeah. And that's what's interesting. So on my side, the application was quick, but the way that I was paired with Legend, he was 8 weeks old. So
Mm-hmm.
a month later, I go meet him, and we begin the process. Now it is an 18-month journey until I get him. So with MK9 as service dogs, part of the process is we were paired when he was 8 weeks, and then we began the process. So I would go to weekly training, but I'm not taking him home. So part of, to your point
Right.
that you said earlier, that became part of my therapy, which I had to kind of make as part of this process to where I had something to look forward to that once a month, right in the beginning, where I'd go out
Right.
there and I'd just be learning things. And for me, I'd never had a dog, so this is completely all new to me. So just learning the basic things as he's learning, I'm learning. That was a different take, but nonetheless, I just want to emphasize because it could sound like, well, you just walked home with a service dog. Like, no, no, no. This was a whole 18-month, 2 year almost
Right.
process. So on your side, you applied, but then you had to wait as well. Talk to us
Had to wait.
about that period until you actually were paired.
So in my period, there's not much going on because my program is really different. My program works predominantly with rescue dogs. There are some dogs that are puppy raised that they have from the time that they're puppies, and then they are able to train them from that point. But this program focuses on rescuing dogs to rescue warriors, and so the dynamic, the design of the program is a little different. The dogs are trained on site at their facility there.
Hmm.
But Hope already knew how to be a service dog when I got there. And so my time of training, of my 3 weeks of intensive on-site training was to build that bond and to learn how to be a
Hmm.
handler at that time.
And how
So
long
it's
did
a
it
very
take you from application acceptance to when you met Hope?
a year and a half,
A
about
year and a
just
half.
about.
So let's just say, for argument's sake, we're kind of in a similar bracket as far as when we actually our service dogs come home with us. So I
That's
apply. 18 months later, 20 months later, COVID kind of made it fun
right,
for me, right? We go home. On your side, you
right.
apply, you accepted. A year and a half later, you're paired up.
And Hope was about the same age. Hope was about a year and a half at that time too.
Hmm.
So our dogs are kind of parallel in age. Their
Hmm.
training looked a little different because Legend was trained from a puppy to be a service dog, whereas
Hmm.
Hope was rescued, and her temperament was assessed and things of that nature. And then she was trained to be a service dog. And also being a rescue, she comes with her own issues, right? That maybe other dogs that are puppy raised or bred to work maybe may not come
Mm-hmm.
with. And so that's also part of the therapeutic bond that we have, is my responsibility and taking care of her as well. Anybody who has a service dog has a responsibility to take care of them, but I have an acute responsibility to be responsive to her needs as well, because
Mm-hmm.
she also has needs, because of her past, in the same way that I do.
So you get to the point where you go, and again, I think it's interesting to speak about this because for some, right, maybe the journey I took worked for them. For you, maybe the journey you took works for you. Someone, for
Right.
example, who applies and needs a CNI dog, they're going to be in a waiting period until the dog is certified and ready to go to be paired with them.
Right.
So there's something to be said for different individuals and how you are. For me, I see goodness and benefit on both sides because
That's right.
looking at the ability on my case, for example, to use that as part of therapy, that's something I needed as I was going through what I was going through this. It gave me something to look forward to, but again, that's something that was working for me. On your side, I think it's interesting to know that I love the motto of what your organization has done as far as being able to not only rescue a dog, but and repurpose and give them a new quote unquote literally a new leash on life, right? To also rescue the veteran, right? So you see the different modalities, but the end result really ends up with a veteran in this case, right, who's able to, you know, again, right, get a new leash on life. But it's amazing just to see that everybody's situation is different because I don't know. I'm not gonna say I don't know. I know for a fact that if I had, walked in and walked out, without being ready for that, that would have not been something that would have worked for me. So I needed that time because there were things in my life that had to settle to be ready for that. Right. Whereas someone else, let's say maybe they need something more immediate. So that's also looking at the organizations, what the wait times are. Are you someone that can make it or work in that type of environment or something like you? So the 3 week intensive, yes, there's a lot. But again, I would say I added no value outside of me just learning it's almost like an online course, right? I had the extended version of a training, and
Mhm.
you had the intensive training yourself. But when it's all said and done, you have your ceremony, and then you go home, and then it becomes really real quick.
Real quick, those first 30 days, right? They always talk about those first 30 days after you're paired. And yeah, it is. When we got dropped off at that airport, ready, right? It was no joke. Like, it was game on. It was, now it's time to
Hmm.
navigate airport security on your own. And of course,
Yes.
it's an airport that sees a class of graduates come through every month.
Yes.
This is still TSA, and they still don't care, right? So it's still, you're already immediately having to be proactive and educate people and advocate on your behalf. And now you don't have a trainer who's there with you who can do it for you,
Hmm.
or who will do it, or who can back you up, or who, when you're getting a little frazzled and you want to have a meltdown, who can, say, hey, this is what's going on. You're no longer in that controlled environment.
Hmm.
You're on your own, and you've got to figure it out.
And
Um,
let's talk to that. So on your side of the house, there's a crash course you went through. So I'll tell you that year and a half, I would go and do, and again, it was very, short veteran sessions. The one thing that,
mhm,
in hindsight now, part of how it worked on our side with me and Legend was every time I'd go to training in the beginning, people seemed to like this. At first, this was the weirdest thing to me. I had to take a shirt that I would wear.
mhm,
So, like, literally gym shirt, whatever, and he would sleep on the shirt. So ever since he was 8, he's been paired up to my smell. That's kind of how, in our situation, that kind of worked out. I mentioned that to say the fact that, on your side, you compounded a lot of activities, but I'm sure, and we'll talk about public access tests, but just simple things like learning how to push a cart in a supermarket, learning that now I'm pushing a cart and I have to wedge myself somewhat to the right, have him close to me because guess what? I'm not interfering with the world. How to navigate, how to go on an escalator, a moving escalator, how to move in an airport, how to get into an aircraft, how to go to a supermarket, walk by the bread aisle, and not have him all up in it. Like those are the things people wouldn't think about. Where you think about the fact of imagine life on going into an elevator in a mall where it's all glass and you're going all the way up, like we're literally at the mall, like what are you doing at the mall, like we're riding elevators today, and you're literally having a dog looking down, learning that stuff.
right. or where people are scared of you. That's the other thing too, right? So people, you now have to deal with the general public. So there's going to be one of two things: they're terrified, or they want to pet your dog.
So you're saying that you
You know,
have some, so you got some drive by, drive by pettings that happen to you,
oh
or
man,
to your service dog rather.
I'm getting frazzled as we talk about it. I'm
Mm-hmm.
getting a
But
yeah.
that's
I
also
mean,
part of training, right? So one of the fun things that, well, an interesting thing I have on my Facebook and Instagram is a video of Legend, kind of knocked out for the day, and I have the Roomba going around him, and people are like, "There's no way in heck my dog could do that," and it's just like, understand there are things in life you have to get used to, aka in training as a little puppy. It's like, okay, why are we stepping on his tail right now? Right? Why am I stepping on his paw right now? And it's desensitizing him to reality, to where I'm in, a tight environment and someone steps on his tail, he's not going to sit there and react. So those type of things, even that, you wouldn't even realize just how much of those small things, for me at least, I would say, now I see it. So that's what my question is. There were so many things that we went through in a very long program that it didn't make
mhm,
sense at the time. Whereas in your case, being the fact that you went there for 3 weeks, there was a lot of information where you were able to
right,
kind of almost put it together very quickly. Whereas with me,
yeah.
I feel like a lot of things I didn't think about it until I, started using, needed to do something, right? I'm in a tight environment and I have to give him the command to go back, and he starts marching backwards, and people are like, "What in the hell is this?" And you're like, "Oh, that makes sense." But like just some simple things like that, that you find that there was a lot of things that you learned, like I would have never even thought, what I mean, having to cram all that information.
Um, so I think, to be honest, I think they prepared us really well as best they could for like real life situations. But the thing is like you're going to encounter stuff that you just didn't train for.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give an example of we went to see Book of Mormon on Broadway. And I was really excited, and it was super, super exciting. But I had a ton of anxiety, right, about bringing my dog because public access is good and well, but oftentimes you have to advocate for yourself. And sometimes I just don't want to have to advocate for myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was a little bit anxious. And when we get there, of course, the seats are so small. In general, for a regular person, the seats are so small, but there's no way my 75-pound dog is fitting at my feet. And then on top of that, I'm seated next to people who hate dogs, right? So it is bad. It is bad because if Hope stands up, her tail is hitting the people in front of us in the back of the head. The people next to us, she's already in their foot space and they don't
Mm-hmm.
want her there. And then trying to get the ushers to reseat us in a sold out show is really difficult. So we ended up having to have like freestanding chairs brought up to the balcony where we
Mm-hmm.
could sit at the balcony, and she was able to sit at my feet. So there's challenges and things like that, right? You're there, you're going to go places, and some places you just might not fit, or you might fit, right? But the people around you might be unwilling to accommodate you or be reasonable. Or maybe whether it matters if they want to accommodate you or be reasonable, it may make your experience
Mm-hmm.
unpleasant. So you have to be flexible, and you have to be kind of solution oriented sometimes in solving those problems because yeah, you can train and practice as much as you want, but as we kind of get better in our mental health and our mental wellness, and as we have better quality of life, many of us are going to now be doing different things and having
Mm-hmm.
different experiences, right? And going different places, whether it's the gym or whether it's a Broadway play, whether it's to your kids' recital.
Well,
You're
and
going to have.
let's talk about that, right? So to that same point, there's an aspect of, you can do all the training you want, right? We've identified, we had different trainings. We could be here all day talk about that alone. A public
Right.
access test is just a test you take to just be able to have different modalities. You go to the airport, a supermarket, a library. There's just basically the basic things you need. You went to see the Book of Mormon. When was that? Was that recently, or was that
It was about 2 years ago.
Okay, so you went to go see the Book of Mormon.
Right.
There's no training for that, right? There's no training when you go to a
No,
theater.
no. And you know what's funny is you bringing that up. Now that you're saying that, the clapping. So that's why I said she kept popping up, right? Because they kept clapping periodically,
Mm-hmm.
and she's curious, and she's also very like
Mm-hmm.
she wants to know what's going on. So she would lay down and she would be in a good stay,
Mm-hmm.
but then she would pop her head up, and her head popping up bop somebody in the back of their head. And mind you, this is a Broadway show. These people did not pay to have a dog bop them in the back of the head while they watch this play. So
Mm-hmm.
now I'm thinking of how I'm going to be considerate of them and their
Mm-hmm.
space. I didn't move because the people didn't like the dog next to me. I moved
Yeah.
because they didn't want. I assumed the people in front of me didn't want dog breath on the back of their neck, right?
Now, did you find yourself initially, even towards the beginning, just not, I guess, going places or doing things more so because of what you perceive or assume would happen. Because it's one of those things where I'll tell you, for example, literally going to a hospital.
Mhm.
Right, my wife had to get a a procedure done for endoscopy. You know, there with her, supporting her, and you don't train to go and be in the little waiting room while they're kind of taking IVs and doing all the questions. Then they wheel them off to do a procedure, and you go to the waiting room, and then you go home. It's a simple thing
Mhm.
until you're going into that little prep little area where all the beds are separated by a little curtain, and guess who comes strolling in here with a service dog, right? And I don't know about you, but I'll tell you that I almost have a countdown. And my wife even can tell it, right? So I come up, she goes first, like, hey, they're letting us go, come up. This is this year, right? So COVID is a thing. So
Mhm.
she's like, no, they're allowing spouses to come up, so you can come up if you want to. So of course I go up to support her, and we go
Or
in.
it's service dog though.
Yeah,
Spouse's dog. That's almost two guests.
there's two guys exactly. You're extra plus one. So I get up there, and to your point, right? Immediately in my mind, I'm like, how many things can go wrong today, right? My whole thing is I've come to the conclusion. He is trained and he is good. It's me that's the problem of not understanding how to maneuver this, right? It's almost like you have literally a muscle car and you don't know how to drive. You better learn because he can do and they're trained to do so many things, but it's
Right.
you that can cause the issue because they're going to pick up on that. So I said to say I get to the hospital. I walk up, and if you've been to one of those little prep things, right, it's the bed and the two little curtains and like one little chair to the right. There's no space in there, right? And of course, I go into the little seating area. Legend goes in under, and he's in his little down. And the nurse comes on the other side because that's the only way she can stand because you can't stand in front of me. And they're taking blood. In my mind, I'm doing a countdown now because they don't know he's there. And as soon as anybody doesn't know service dog is there, guess what? Three, two, one, looks over and goes, "Oh my God, I did it!" Everything stops. Forget her procedure, forget her vitals, forget whatever you're there for. It's literally, I'm up here, not down there. The attention has left. It is literally, you're not here right now. Oh my goodness! They walk over, then they stop. I know I can't touch him, but I love him. I
I've
just lost one a
had
year ago.
I've had an entire restaurant front of house staff approach me at my table. I've had people leave their workstations to approach my table at the restaurant that I'm trying to eat at because
Hmm.
they want to look at
Yeah,
my dog.
I've gone to the
And
optometrist, and literally it's 5 minutes of how he's doing, and then my appointment. Like, I'm the
yeah,
aftermath. I'm here for an appointment, and it's like, well, how's he doing? And you're like, hey, he's fine, and this, that, the third. Thanks, doc. All right, back to me now.
I mean, there's people, my neighbor, it's funny, just this last week, I've had the same neighbor for about 2 years at this point, and we have a great relationship. He's an older gentleman. We talk regularly. Shout out to Mr. Smith. He's a wonderful man. But he just asked me last week what my name was because he said,
What do you mean you don't
I
know who I
know,
am? Nobody cares about
but
you.
what is your name? And he said, I'm embarrassed to ask you, but what is your name? Because I know Hope. And that's kind of like what life is, right? As you become a secondary, you're an afterthought to the dog.
I'm telling you, wait till you have. It's almost like having kids. When you get to grandma's house, they don't. It's like you come by yourself. You're like, oh. When you come with the grandkids, of course, everybody's happy. When it comes to Legend, it's the same exact thing. It's literally. And again, we're making light of it, but understand there's another side here where the last thing in life that many of us want to do is be the center of attention. And we talked about this
Mhm.
before.
Yes, we
Never,
have.
never have I ever, right, in my life, gone to a gym and been the center of attraction. I am by no means the biggest, the tallest, the strongest, the fastest. None of those things. I am
Right,
literally in the spectrum of not impressive in the middle, right?
right.
So when you go to a gym, and again, it's just life. I'm not the one over there, picking, having things up, putting them down, and doing all that stuff. All of a sudden, you go from being no one to you walk in and everyone. You would have thought Arnold Schwarzenegger has walked in, or what I'm saying, a top fitness model. It's literally everyone just goes to you, and if it's a nice little gym that has a little thing on top where they walk around, you can see everything because it's open space. Guess what? Everybody just goes whoop because it's the
Yeah.
one thing that no one expects. So even people working out, it's just like, oh, they're working out, and you're like,
Mhm.
but that whole
Uh-huh.
fact that you know.
And you have to be in the
Mhm.
mood for that. You have to be in, let's be real, you have to be in the mood for that because every day I don't, let's be very honest. And I explain it to people like this. Sometimes when I'm in the frozen food section, I just want to get my frozen vegetable or my pizza or whatever I want
And
to. I
bounce.
don't discuss the dog. Like, I'm not here for to advocate for service dogs. I'm not here to explain them to you. I'm literally just here to like get my bread and my
Mm-hmm.
peanut butter or whatever I'm here for and go. But you have to be prepared for that because that's going to happen inevitably.
Supermarkets,
And
regular places, which goes
you
to the
are
point that you and I talked about, which was being ambassadors, right? I find that I have the ability to talk and break stigma and answer questions, but I also have to understand that sometimes I'm not going to be in that mood to do that. Right, there's going
yeah,
to be times where that same example, right? We're going to the store, and everybody knows how it is, right? I'm married. We go to the store for one thing. Guess what? We're coming up with a whole cart full. So that five
right.
minute walk turns into a whole thing now. That said, the more and more I'm walking, it's for me. It's also a learning period for the family because now even my wife has to almost be sensitive to the fact of am I now getting agitated being somewhere? Because
Yeah.
again, it's now I'm the one getting the looks. I don't see anything, but I'm hyper aware of people looking at me and me being somewhere. So the fact that it's like, okay, well, you know what? We also need to get some pans for this, and you know what? Well, we're here to go to the milk aisle. In the back of my mind, I'm like, get the goddamn soap and let's get the fuck out of here because
Yeah.
I'm just, what I mean, because it's the reality. And granted, absent him, it'd be like, go to the aisle, just willy nilly. But the fact that that is also a reality, it's from the family perspective. It's not just me. It's also understanding that I have to learn to be able to say, okay, I'm getting kind of tired, or can we wrap this up without coming across like I don't want to be here, but it's just I'm being agitated because you don't see that this lady has been going through all the aisles, kind of following and looking at me. You know what I mean? It's like I have stalkers here in the grocery store.
And it's funny. It's people forget common courtesy when you have a service animal. They stare at you, they point at you, they talk about you very loudly
Some
as if
kids,
you can't
some kids
hear
will run right
them.
on you because their parents don't stop them.
Oh, I've had people send their small children up to, which is mind blowing because both one, I'm a stranger, and two, this is an animal that you do not know, and three, you don't know that I don't snatch
Hmm.
children, you don't know that I don't kidnap kids. Like,
Right.
it's bizarre to me. But because you have a dog, people, and I suspect because I am a woman, people
Hmm.
assume that I'm a trusting figure that they
Hmm.
should send their children up to.
We'll
And
talk about that now. So now that we're here, you are a woman, right? We're talking about the differences in our lives, but the fact is you're a woman. So let me ask
mhm.
you a question, Alexis. Who are you training that service dog for?
Man, the number one question is so when's he going to his owner? And I've had this, I think I told you this, I've had people who I've had classes with an entire semester, and
Mm.
I studied social work. So, social justice, social advocacy are topics that come up. I talk about being disabled with a service animal. It's not a secret to my peers by any stretch. And yet, and still, I've had the questions of who are you training him for? Um, so it's one of those things where it's incredibly frustrating because the perception is that the dog cannot be for me, and naturally, people ask questions that are, not super appropriate, right?
Hmm.
Because they're very serious. That
How
happens.
old how old are you, Alexis?
I'm 30.
You're a 30-year-old woman in New York City with a service dog. I'm a
Yeah.
39-year-old man with a family. Understand, and I want to mention this because you see, because we're recording, right? I'm wearing, U.S. Army disabled veteran shirt. The reality is, I don't travel the
Look at that.
world at all with anything that says military. I don't have a hat
Mhm.
that says military. I don't, I'm not the walking OIF. Like, we'll do this here for the camera because obviously we want people to know who we are. But the reality is that in regular world, it's a regular hat. It's a regular hoodie. You wouldn't know by just looking at me walking through the world that I'm a veteran, right? If you just saw me at the supermarket. And so,
And
so
that's
that reality for some is also that disconnect of who are you training it for. This is amazing, and you're like, well, first one, I'm the veteran, and two, what I mean, like those are the
right.
realities of how we're perceived.
I mean, it's fascinating. I get it all the time, even when I've been with male friends, right? So my car has veteran license plates, and I've still had people yet and still be like, "So, are you the veteran?" To my male friend, who is not driving the car. So it's just a constant and chronic assumption, right, that women are not veterans, and I think that people are. It's not intentional, and I don't think it's often not out of malice. But the presumption, right, is that I am training this dog for somebody else because I myself am probably not the veteran. And we have that problem, in a lot of places, to include the VA.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's one of those things where, and the environment, let's be real, and where I am in New York City, many people are not like, oh, that's a veteran with their service dog. They're like, what's that little brown girl trying to
Hmm.
do with that dog, and why is she trying to come up in my grocery store?
Right. Or how come he gets to bring his dog to the store and I can't bring my dog? I'm saying too. I've been to Walmart Well, I've heard this. Now, I'm married, my wife's a veteran, and I think good and well that probably my wife gets a little more triggered than I do sometimes. Because I tell you, we've gone to Walmart, and the question comes up of well, why does he get to have his dog with him? And she like looks back, and she's like, well, first of all, who the hell talk about dogs here? Like that, it's a service dog. It's not Fido, right? It's not your little dog here that's not trained to do a thing. You know what I mean? And again, it's not to be confrontational, but those are the realities that you deal with. You're constantly getting either a look, a question. You hear those statements from people as you're walking through an aisle, and all you want to do is just kind of do your business, right, to the frozen aisle, piece, get what you're getting, and just leave, and not have to deal with the additional scrutiny. Because again, one thing we talked about the other day was if I was walking with a cane, you wouldn't pay me any mind. If I was in a wheelchair, you just get out the way. But this
I
is
love
it's a medical equipment, right? At the end of the day, to mitigate a disability. It just happens to also look like something that you want to hug all day. But let us be clear here: it's not. That's not what's supposed to be happening here, and that's why these conversations are needed. Because I understand, I get it. I would see a service dog from a distance and also look because it's just something new that you don't see. But that's where I think courtesy, right? Like I don't have a problem having a conversation, but just respect my space. Alexis, how are you, ma'am? Do you mind if I ask a few questions? You know what? No problem. And that's simply one of those things where being oh, I said your name and the machine picked it up.
I get this
How do you
all
how
the
do you
time.
how do you on your side? Is that something you see as well that happens?
Oh, I see it all the time, and I think the distinction that I'm forever making is that this is not a pet. This is not a pet. This is not my pet. She is not my pet. I can't say it enough. I can't emphasize it enough.
It doesn't
Hope is
matter
not
what the
my
vest says. It doesn't matter how
yeah.
much
This
stuff
is
you
not
put
my
on.
pet. I get it that she's a dog, but she is not my pet, and I do not treat her as a pet because if I treated her as a pet, her life would look very different, right? And I think that that's an important distinction that those who want to have service dogs need to consider and really
Hmm.
and think about this is not your pet. If you want a dog to bring to family functions and a cute little vest that everyone's going to pet and play with, then you need to look at a different option because that's not what a service dog is. Um,
Hmm.
and it's one of those things where people don't understand it. They're going, some people are going to think you're mean because you won't let them pet your dog when they're working. I mean, you're going to have to be prepared to set those boundaries. You're going to have to be prepared to advocate for yourself. And, I'm being very honest and very real because these were not necessarily things that I was prepared for or
Hmm.
prepared to do. That being said, I would not change my decision, right? I would still get a service dog and I would still do everything the same. But I think it's really important to be really upfront and really clear about what life looks like with a service dog. And so you're forever going to be questioned about why people can't pet your dog.
Hmm.
People are always going to say, and something that I found really, really frustrating in the beginning, and sometimes to this day, is, oh, I wish I could bring my dog everywhere.
Oh God, that's the one. That's the one.
No, no, you don't because it's not fun. It is not fun to always bring your dog everywhere. It's not fun to be the center of attention. It is not fun to be stared at. It is not always fun to be different. And it is
Mm-mm.
not fun to always have to be responsible for your animal, the same way that people do not always want to be responsible for their children 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Hmm.
I don't always want to be responsible for my dog 24 hours a
Hmm.
day, 7 days a
Well,
week.
let's talk about that, right? So, and we're gonna start shifting here in about 2 minutes to some questions as we talk, because there's some good ones in the comments section. Um, Looking at that alone, right? So there's a difference here. There's a bond is established. Again, there's so many different things that we can break down, but I'll say that the responsibility is something that it doesn't matter what your background is or what you think. This is a whole different beast. This is not, you have a great dog and, you put him in a kennel and off you go. This is literally wherever you go. There's a schedule, for example, that Legends on. Right, he eats twice a day. Right, he has a set feeding time. I feed him. He goes. He's trained to do all these great things, and he goes on command. But the fact is, I have to take care of that. Right, like I'm doing a live right now. My teenager can go take him out to relieve himself, but 95% of the time, I'm the one that's either going to be doing the feeding. I am definitely the only one getting up at old dark 30 to take him out and do what has to happen. And that's one of those things where even for me, like I had to change just the way I looked at the week. Because one of the things
Mhm.
I just did not consider is there is no such thing as the weekend. Guess what?
No,
Every day he is dependent on me to do what he has to do. So to get up and use the bathroom and start the morning off and eat, that all has to happen by my hands. And I will share that for me, I will always hold on to my personal belief that my wife, sometimes grins a little bit and smiles because 3 kids later, guess what? This is not where I can be like, oh, honey, you got to go to work, got to deploy. The wife's holding it down. Well, guess what? This one is all me. There is no
All the
help at all. And no, there is. Let me not be, facetious
there
here,
is,
but it's
but
that responsibility.
not as if it were a pet. Not as if it's, oh, can you feed the dog? Did you walk the dog? Did you?
Mm-hmm.
It's not the same. The vast majority of the responsibility falls on you,
Yes.
as it should. But that is, again, different than a pet, to where everybody can feed the dog, everybody walks the dog, everybody is, making sure the
Mm-mm.
dog is played with and
Nope.
entertained. It falls on you. It's your
Mm-hmm.
responsibility. Um, and we keep coming back to this word of responsibility, but that's what it is. It is a responsibility. You are
Mm-hmm.
responsible, not for the dog, in my view, but I'm responsible to the dog.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way that she works for me, I am in service to her.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really important to keep that perspective, and to care for your dog in that same way. It's an amazing bond and it's an amazing relationship. And that's why, um, it's a big growth, it's a big period of adjustment, right? Because most of us have never had a relationship like you will have with your service dog
Mm-hmm.
before. No matter how much you loved your dog before, your pet dog as a kid, or the dog that you
Right.
had before, it's a very different dynamic, and it's life changing.
And for many, one of the comments, that I'll bring up here, is it's not so fun to be anxiety ridden, but I have to have a dog with me to be able to exist.
Yes, yes,
That's one of those things that it goes back to the point of, I can tell you, going, let's say, on a family vacation, and for me in the beginning, again, we were placed, me and Legend were placed over the summer, so we're still developing a lot of things. So it's still a lot of newness going on. You've been in your journey a little bit longer, so you see the
yes,
parallels of kind of where we're at. But I'll tell you that in the beginning, just going to something like a family vacation, or hey, we're gonna go, let's say, to Myrtle Beach, and we're gonna go to the boardwalk. And I'll be honest with you, right? Again, it doesn't matter what training you went through. I'm literally standing there looking at the boardwalk, and the first thing I'm thinking to myself is, there's a whole bunch of signs here that says no dog. So how does this work? Well, the ADA says wherever humans can go, you can go. So there's not going to be a sign that says service dog can comes. But even something
right.
that simple, where you just like there's nobody here, the training wheels are off. I have to go transit life, and no matter what you went through, you have to now begin to trust the training, but also work through that. There's going to be things that are going to be triggering at times. If anything, I found that the beginning phases were more triggering than anything else, because it's like, oh goodness, here now I'm dealing with this stuff, and there's self-doubt, there's issues, there's like, was this the right decision, am I even suited to do this correctly? All that stuff happens. So one of the questions that came up in the chat was if there is support as you're going to the program. And I'll say that one of the things that I can definitely attest to on my side for sure is that there is ongoing support. It's like a family, right? I now, because I'm in proximity of the organization, I go to monthly training, right? I don't have to go to that training because we did the swap, and I would have to go after work for a period of time, and I'm past that period. But in my case, I still go because it's just good to be around other individuals like me. It's good to be
Mhm.
around other service members who are going through their training process. And I remember what that was like. But again, just the fact of having that support system, both to each other like this, and the organization, regardless of where you go, because it's an ongoing thing. It's not just about recertifying. It's the fact that you at least have that ability to reach out to those individuals that helped you along the way to do that. So I would say, for my side of the house, yeah, I think there's definitely support post placement. On your side, Alexis, how has been support wise, and what does that look like on your side?
Definitely. So many of the people from who graduated in my class stay in touch. There's a Facebook group for all graduates who have graduated the program. You can stay in touch with the Warrior trainers. They have a in-house general counsel should you need some legal help. So, for example, when my school wasn't being as hmm,
Accommodating.
amenable, yeah, they weren't being as accommodating as perhaps they should have been. Not as perhaps as they should
Mm-hmm.
have, right? When they weren't being as accommodating as they should have been, I was able to have that kind of advocacy and that support on that end. I had legal help, I had social help. In terms of like, what do I do if I want to go XYZ? I can call them. I mean, Hope cut her paw. I was able to text a picture to a 20, there's a 24-hour warrior trainer who's there. So there's a
Mm-hmm.
24-hour number I can text. She's cut.
Mm-hmm.
Do I go to the vet? Do I not go to the vet? Or she's
Mm-hmm.
throwing up, or the poop is this
and and,
color.
and
What is,
that's and that's huge. That's some support because one of the questions that came up as far as just care, like I take him to his vet appointments, all the things that have to happen with him. At least I'm not doing it alone. I have that support system of knowing, okay, he's not feeling well, something's kind of funky going on. I have the ability to reach out to the organization and get the support because they're always available. And it's kind of cliche because you hear like, hey, if you need anything, reach out. We're always here. But it's like, no, truly, if you go through an organization, like take them up on that. Like, don't just make a
you will
point
have
to just
questions.
exactly.
You will have questions. And when you're the only person after, however, whether it's 3 weeks, 3 months, or 3 years, when you're the only person who's picking up your dog's poop for that long, and
Hello.
then you notice a different shade or a different texture,
Oh, I know when something's
um,
off immediate.
exactly. But do you always want to go straight to the vet? No. So that's a text to the warrior trainers of, hey, it's looking different, or hey, this is what's going on with her. She's a little lethargic, or hey, she's has a limp. Is this a vet worthy issue? I'm able to, get that insight and that help there.
Hmm.
And sometimes it's not a vet worthy issue. Sometimes it's just a, hey, did you think about changing her food, or did you change her food, or,
Hmm.
did she get into something? And sometimes that's the answer. So yeah, I have a ton of support. I'm at the stage where I am a few years out now. So I am in and we could talk about that too, how it evolves. I'm a few years out now. And so
Hmm.
I am able to do things without hope in ways that I wasn't years ago.
Hmm.
Um, how that my life has evolved and improved because of having hope, right? So I think that this is a super important
And I think
conversation,
that's
and I'm
I
really
think that's growth. Because so one point I want to kind of parallel and contrast with that is, one that in your journey, right? Certain things you're able to reclaim or work through, and to your point, right? Maybe for this now, this is not something you need. That said, there's also other things that in the process, Legend has learned to do that wasn't part of training. As they get
mhm,
more close to you, where he can detect certain things that are going on physiologically with me that were not, specifically what he was trained to do with that bond of him being able to pick up on those things, right? As being the man transiting the world and having to do things like go to a public bathroom in places. Like the first time I
yes,
ever, and I'll never forget it, like we've been many places, but the very first time I ever went to a public bathroom, again, these are the things you don't hear about. I'm in a urinal. And God's honest truth, it's like, okay, I'm gonna go use the urinal, and he literally backs up into the back of my leg. Of course, as a man in a urinal, there's a whole space thing, right? No one should be touching me when I'm, at the urinal. He is on the back of my leg, pushed up behind me, literally in daggone near tactical formation. Like, look, my eyes on the door. Handle your business. I'm here. Because when we go take our dogs out, what do? Right? They go do their stuff. They're looking one way, and they're like, "Hey, you're supposed to look the other way because we don't know when danger's coming." Right? It's a
right.
pack. It's survival. Right? And it's funny to me to kind of contrast that with the fact that in a public restroom, I am literally using a urinal. The first time out, it always stands out. But he literally backs up into me. I'm like, what is this? Like, I know he's with me, but it's just weird. Like, oh crap, he's with me, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
you know, how
Or
how is
even
that? So talk to me about just even the public restroom with a service dog as a woman.
it's really hard to fit in stalls. Like, let's be I have a larger dog. She's not huge, but she's a larger dog, and
Mm-hmm.
so really hard. I've had a hard time getting out before, like not being funny. Like I've had a
No.
hard time. Um, it's
And you
it's really
factor in sanitation of where you're at. Do you want them to stay standing? I don't want them to go on a down in
so
this daggone dirty bathroom floor.
so that's another huge thing is she like no, I don't have her touch bathroom floors, and so I don't give her a command. I just need you to stand there and
Mm-hmm.
chill.
Mm-hmm.
Um, out of the way, please.
Right, but those
And
are the
so
things people don't even like. Again, that's one of those things where I would have never in my wildest dreams thought about the small stall and having to fit. Because guess what, the handicap one is out of commission or completely destroyed. So,
or if you're flying, I'm not using the
oh
bathroom,
goodness,
right? I'm not leaving my dog with a stranger. I'm not trusting these people. It's not a flight attendant's responsibility. So
yeah.
no, you thinking about things like that. So if I'm on this flight, like what do I do?
Hmm.
Or making plans for things like that. It's always
So that's a good point I want to bring up too, which is planning. Everything changes when you're doing stuff, right? Like if we're gonna go someplace at this point, again, here I come with the family situation. It's like when you're gonna go someplace, kids, use the bathroom, make sure you do stuff, and it's like make sure letting go,
Dog.
take them out, right? So literally, at this point, the one good thing about training is and being on schedule is I timed him. So we'll go outside and literally he's 60 seconds. We'll go outside. He does his business. We're in the car. We're out of here. In the morning, I found a hack, which I think I shared. I didn't share it with you. I shared it with Michelle. One day I was looking at something, and in the morning we get up. I take him out to get busy. We come back in. He eats, and then he kind of just lays down, and I do my morning stuff. Well, one day I was kind of just up looking at something. And I was like, you know what? I want to let the food kind of settle a little bit in the water and kind of absorb it because I had seen something online. So I'm
Mhm,
preparing the meal before we go out. I
mhm.
promise you, I have never seen this dog move so quick in his life. When I tell you
Yes,
that that was a trick that I did not realize, I have timed it literally a minute 20 seconds. We walk outside. He runs to his one spot, does the pee, runs to the other side, does a little circle thing, does his stuff. He's like, "Let's go! It's food time." I'm
let's
like,
go.
"Oh, this is amazing! It's 20 degrees outside. I'll be back in 90 seconds."
Yes,
Literally, it's. But those are the type of things you don't think about. Where it's like, look, I'll tell you what's not going to happen. I'm not going to sit here just walking around for him to take his time because that goes back to training. If you have a service dog, this is not. And again, for others who see this, they're like, "What is going on here?" And it's like, I'm not going to
well,
just
but
do the whole random. Take your time and when you're ready. No.
that's what pets do, right? I have a service dog, and so I'm on it. I may be on a timeline. I have places to go, people to see, things to do. So this dog needs to be on the same timeline that I am on, right? And you know how
Mm-hmm.
many times I'm late for class, late for school, late for work, and I'm like, let's go.
Go.
30 go pee because we're getting in this car.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it sounds rough, but that's life, and
Mm-hmm.
that's the distinction of I keep saying it's not a pet. She's a working dog, and this is what working dogs
Well,
do.
you know what? Let's go ahead and let's be honest with people here and talk about when they're not working because we had a few chuckles about that, which is also just a life with a service dog where you have a vest on and he's on it. Like sometimes like because it's like when you have kids, I will say, when you have kids, you don't see your kids how others sees your kid. In the sense
Right,
of like they're so behaved and they're so well trained. All I see is the one time I told him to do something, he didn't do it. In my mind, all I see is those things.
right.
And when you are in places, like we went to the hospital, right, and we're sitting there, and people are just like, "I didn't even know the dog was here." I'm like, "That's what's supposed to happen. It's supposed to be like that." That's the difference
It's
between the real deal and the imposters, which is out there. And I say that to say that literally, it's like clockwork, and sometimes you don't really realize there's all the things that you're trained to do with him that come in handy, right? Like again in the hospital thing, and it's like there's no space here, but guess what? Just back, and he kind of goes back, and people are just like, "Oh my goodness, this is amazing." Again, one
Mhm.
example. However, you get home, the vest comes off. He's like, "All right, I'm off duty now." Off duty sometimes means that hey, come over here do stuff. He's like, "You see a vest on me?" And
Did
sometimes
you
he
hear me? I was calling Hope over before we went live. I was like, "Come here, come here, come here, come here." And she's looking at me like I'm crazy. She's like, "I don't
she's
have
like
to come."
this, off duty, not scheduled time for this.
Where's the vest lady? I mean, she's just she thinks it's not a command, it's a suggestion,
For
right?
those
Like
that,
it's
for those listening to this, I just had to focus on that because when you said that, it was funny because there's times when I'll say something, and that's what it feels like. It's like, oh, it's a suggestion, and I'm like, because it's not a robot either, right? There's time when he's just playing with my kids and whatever, but the minute I get off from here, guess what? It's go time. But it's just funny the fact that sometimes they'll, like anything else, like kids, they'll push boundaries, and it's like, how much can I get away with? But when we're working, it's just like boom. It's like a machine type of thing, right? Like he's on, we're clued in, I understand things. But other times, like you said, right? It's like, do you see a vest on me? Because unless you got some treats for me right now, I am off duty, so I'm gonna go here and lay down. Leave me be. Because when I'm working, you are exhaustive, sir.
hello. She's like, I'm on break, lady. I'm on break. You don't
Yep.
have to see me in a few minutes.
Like I don't get paid enough for this, so if you want that, I'm gonna need a raise by way of a tarit or some type of fun stuff.
This dog is so spoiled, and that's the other thing too of not spoiling your dogs because they're working dogs, but also taking really good care of your dogs. So you know, from the vet to getting groomed to having toys and stuff for their mental health and their mental wellness, right? So she
Mm-hmm.
having her new toys and taking her for walks and just making sure that she's
Everything to a degree because it's work. It's a reward system to a degree because that builds that. Like I've shared that sometimes we'll go out for a walk or do something, and I use nature as part of the reward system. Now, understand with a dog, if you're going to walk through a path that's lined with grass on all sides and there's a small little cement walkway, well, guess what? We're doing no sniffing right now. And literally, your
Right.
reward, as we kind of do and are still connected, is that tree. I see you seeing that tree, but I'm not telling you to go. Okay, sniff.
Right.
And literally, it's just like, what do you mean sniff? There's understand the world we live in. It's a different
Right.
story to just he can go out and meddle and do things. And granted, there's free time and just kind of let it out. But just understanding that now it's like if you Google right the art of attention, there's different ways to look at this. But the fact that it becomes synonymous to where I look at you, I get what I want. I see you, I get the food. I see you, I do. There's that dependency there that all the things that come through me are part of that, right? So the more that you develop those things, right, when it comes to the real world, people obviously see your dog is so well trained and all these different things. All I'm thinking about is she took a little too long to do this other thing. But again, they're not machines. It's just the reality
Yeah.
of the difference of just everyday living.
It's so true because people tell me I have the best dog ever, and I'm like,
That's questionable.
no, I don't. I'm like, no, I don't. But you're right because all it takes is that one time that you didn't respond to my command, or that didn't
Yeah.
time one the one time you were being a dog, right? And it's not to say that she's a bad service dog or any of those things.
But
Today we had a moment.
they also have days off. I mean, like you get sick, you don't feel good. Like you're entitled to have an off day. You were saying about today?
So today we had a successful day because I had her outside off leash at a vest, and a stranger walked by, and she went to run to the stranger, and I said, no, and she immediately stopped on a dime, and that
Mm,
was great because she is very, very motivated by people. She's very
yes.
friendly with people, and if she's not in vest, she typically doesn't care.
Hmm.
Today was a really good, good sign of restraint, some good obedience, and that stuff is continual. You'll always have to do obedience. You'll always be testing your dog. Your dog will always be testing you.
Hmm.
You can do skills.
They're
So it,
personable skills if we don't stay on top of them. That's a big one. And I think that that's huge to share that because again that goes to just everyday living and just that bond because even like those signs sometimes I saw something online that was amazing and it was literally a German Shepherd and the trainer was answering questions on TikTok and the question was the sign says do not pet, is it for someone's safety, right? It's a more aggressive looking dog. And he goes, well, I'll show you what happens when I let people pet. And the pet in question, right? I mean, the service dog in question, rather, who was petted by someone, you see that they're very hyper responsive. So, like Legend, for example, so it's like, no, I don't want you to pet him because he literally is very responsive. So it's not so much that, it's that he's also very much like literally he'll go and try to, play and do that stuff. And guess what he's not doing then? So that whole do not pet thing, you're distracting. And again, for us, you don't know. Let's just break it up here. Maybe Alexis also may have a situation where he's also monitoring whether or not she may go into an epileptic attack, or I may have a diabetic situation. And if he's too busy over here jumping up because you're over here trying to get some rubs in, guess who's not being paid attention to? Those are the things people don't realize or see, and that's why it's incumbent to address the handler to be able to ask a question. Right? May I pet your dog? Right now he's working. No, thank you. But thanks for asking. Because the reality is you don't know what's going on with the individual you're asking a question to.
right. And you know what I would say too, and good practice of dealing with people and service dogs is don't ask. Just don't ask. If they want you, if they feel like letting you pet their dog, they'll definitely let you or make it clear or let you know.
We know
If
you're
you want to
looking.
pet your dog, I want to know. I mean, I don't want to know. I know. I tend to know. If you're staring at my dog and you can't make eye contact with me and you're, oh,
Hmm.
like, all of this, I know you want to pet my dog. And so I will give you the go ahead if that's what the case is. You don't have to ask because I know you've made it very clear.
I see it in
Um,
your eyes.
but also, stop putting, I think we oftentimes put people in positions, oh, you have a service dog, what's it for? Can I pet it? I mean, we're putting handlers in positions
Mm-hmm.
that are sometimes uncomfortable and unnecessary.
Mm-hmm.
If you see a dog and it's working and it's in its vest and it says do not pet,
Right. And that goes into the rules, right? For the NDA, you can only ask those two questions, right? Is it a service dog and is it task trained to do a thing? You know what I mean? You're not sitting here having a whole inquiry. I went to the Army Museum the other day for our last training in December. We went to the Army Museum, and we walk in, and they ask you the questions, right? Is your
mhm,
service dog? Yes, he is, right? What's who? The funny thing is, the question, right? One is a service dog, and is he trained to task, so forth. The
mhm,
funny thing is, my response, without even thinking about it, because you don't really get asked too much depending on where you go sometimes.
mhm.
I go, yeah, he's a service dog. And the gentleman says, what task are you trained, to perform, etc. And I said, me. The guy just looks at me and he's like, I'm like, he's trained for me.
Yeah.
I'm the look. It's a whole. It's how much it's an encyclopedia. And the guy goes have a good day and we go off. But afterward, I just couldn't stop laughing because it wasn't like I planned to say that. It was literally like who's he trained for? It's like what's he trained like he's trained for me. He the question was what I thought he said who. I'm like, oh no, he's mine. We're good. Have a good day.
No.
But that's just some of the things you see. One question that came up here from just another jarhead. Everyone tells me, dude, you need a service dog. And we'll do some speed round answers here. I'll say, brother, in this one, they people can say all day you need a service dog, but the question is, do you understand what it means to have a service dog? People can tell you all day you need one. You have to be able to come to grips with, yes, I am going to take this journey because I need one. What would you say, Alexis?
Yeah, I think that listen, I think that it is life changing. I think it can enhance your quality of life. I think it can save your life, and I think it is so important. I absolutely think that service dogs are I think service dogs are amazing. With that said, it is a huge responsibility. It is a life changer. It is going to come with things that are not fun, like constantly being stared at, which was, I'll be honest, it was really hard for me for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
The staring comments and the pointing and the mom, she has a dog, stuff like that was really hard for me for a really long time. And I had to work through that. And it was really uncomfortable. And it was past uncomfortable. It was actually really, I was angry all the time, right? Because I
Mm-hmm.
don't like stared at. Nobody likes that. Um, so it was tough, and I had to be prepared to do the work to get through those things. And so, while I encourage anybody, if you have a service or if you have a disability that a service dog can help mitigate, I absolutely encourage you to look into programs that are. We don't have an accrediting body yet, but look into reputable service dog programs. Look into how they're vetting you. If they're not vetting you, that's not where you want to be. Um, and really consider what you're taking on. It is, akin to having a child. It is a full-time responsibility. It is something that you have to think about how you're going to be received, how your family is
Mm-hmm.
going to be, how your family is going to receive it. Do you have support? Are you prepared to undertake, like you said, the financial responsibilities? Can you afford to go to the vet? Can you afford dog food?
Yes.
Um, do you have the time and energy to take care of a dog? Are you able to physically move to get your dog outside, take your dog out?
Mm-hmm.
Are your mobility issues such that you're not able to take the dog out? So there's a lot of things to consider.
And I would add to that, Alexis, also that it's unlike a kid. This one doesn't learn how to do things for themselves to become independent. This
That's
is
right.
a dependency that will always last. I will always have to feed him. I will
Hmm.
always have to take him out to do his business. That is something that is not like, my 9-year old who I wish would never grow. Like, she's pretty much independent. She's doing her own thing. And like, you stop that. In this instance, this is a whole different ball game that there is no, oh, look at him. He can feed himself now. Or he can, nope, none of that.
Yeah, I think that's it's really important to remember that it is. Here's the thing, and the reason I say all of this stuff, and the reason why I emphasize the challenges that come along with it, is because sometimes when you're already struggling, to add an additional responsibility is not always the best idea, right? And so I think it's really important to consider where you're at and where you're coming from and where you're trying to go. Because it's not to say that a service dog can't help you, but it's important to understand if the service dog can help you right now and where you're
Hmm.
at. Um, and for some of us, that might mean doing a little bit more work with our therapists and with our psychiatrists and
Thank
with
you.
our trainers and whatever to get to a place where a service dog can be most helpful and most beneficial to us. So yeah, I think it's a lot to consider.
And that's why I think it's great you said that because I literally all I want to just highlight is the therapist part. That's why the application piece is just something right now that makes sense, right? People can say you need one, you should get one, but does your therapist who knows what you're dealing with, do you have a plan to go through this? Because you might not be there yet. There might be things like we just mentioned, right? The first ramp off or the first handover, it was, if anything, more triggering than anything else. Like, wait a minute, this is not making things better right now. It's actually exacerbating things for many, right? But it is getting you more active in the world. It is making you socialize. It's helping to mitigate things. It is alerting. It is doing all the things that they're trained to do. But when it's all said and done, you're walking around with a beacon that says, hey, look at me, I'm here, and all the things that we've shared today. So those are the things for sure that really I would say, not only, to Alexa's point, you yourself, but I think speaking with your therapist and finding out, right, is that something? Because then your therapist, if they're worth, their weight in gold, right, they will be able to talk through that and be able to say, okay, well, this is the reality. Let's talk about this because maybe this is a good fit, or maybe we should do some other things when we get there because maybe you're not ready for that yet. And that
Right.
answers also Jesus' question that he brought up here of his wife looking into him. Like, so this is a good point, which I left it up there for a little bit when you were talking, which is, you've been through therapy, you've been through things, you've exhausted and tried things. Now this might be now the option, right? So I
Now
would
might
say
be the time.
exactly, exactly. So I would say, Jay, in this side of the house, yeah, definitely, begin the process of looking into that. That's why this conversation is there because this may be what makes a difference and gives you, that ability to, find something that may work for you. To Jay's question there. Just another jarhead you brought up earlier. 7 years of
Wow.
equine therapy here.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So can you comment below as to how is that coming along for you? How do you like it? We'll put it up for people to see as well. But yeah, we talked about it. But there you go. Here we have one of our brothers who has been in equine therapy.
Yeah, I actually just did that. Was it last summer? No, it wasn't this past summer because nobody had a summer this past summer. I guess the summer before last, I did equine therapy for the first time, and it was amazing. I found it very similar to kind of the therapeutic feeling I felt when I first got my service dog.
Hmm.
I really enjoyed it, but that just goes to show that I think, as we talked about earlier, to try different approaches and different modalities and different combinations of things because you don't know what the right one might be to help you.
Yeah. One thing I
Brian, that's a really
yeah, I'll take you can take it.
Yeah. So Brian said that's one of the things I wrestle with is how having a service dog will be a public display that something ain't right. That's a hard thought to get past. And you know what, Brian? I can really speak to that. That was something that was really hard for me for a long time, right? I felt like I had a billboard or a physical display that something was wrong with me. And it was really difficult to get past that. But something that was helpful for to me was just knowing that it wasn't my identity. It didn't kind of define who I was. Um, and moving past that and having the support of my friends and family who really just normalized for me that like who cares? Who cares what people think? People are going to look at you and judge you no matter what happens
Anyway.
we do. Um, and more often than not, you'll find that people are supportive and are interested and curious. Many people are supportive and thankful for your service, and many people are supportive and thankful of what you need to do to get to a place to what you have the best quality of life possible. And that's what this is all about: is what's going to be best for your quality of life. And sometimes that's putting aside what people are going to think about us, right?
Let's see. The question is great to have a service dog, but what about taking care of it, having a kennel, keeping it healthy? So that's some of the things that we talked about, which are all parts of that, right? So he sleeps in his kennel. He jumps on the bed and freaking, depending on how I'm feeling that day, he is part of that. But yeah, all those pieces are part of it, right? So one of the things I will say that's been good, and again, every organization is different. On top of the support piece, it's also looking at what they may be able to help support, right? So, for example, access to certain organizations, having things that may are sent from via sponsors and things like that. Like sometimes we'll get stuff that comes in the mail. They'll send us from people that have sponsored stuff for Legend and I toys, treats, things like that. Some of the medication that he may need. The vet that we go to, for example, they've been very accommodating and supportive, right? So some of the things that they give us access to are at a discount. For example, I take them to the groomer. They give a discount because it's a service dog. So, regular life happens. But to the point of the question, right, those are the things you have to do. So, really, that relationship of even knowing, spending time, right? So, when I first got him, for example, at this point, when I first got him, I think he got like one tick or two of them
Mm,
because he was kind of going to the bushes sometimes and doing stuff. But again, just
right.
even knowing that, because I'm spending time, I'm grooming him, I'm touching, I can kind of detect if anything's off, any lumps. So because you spend so much time with them, you can pick up on things very quickly. At this point, he's never had one again because now I know exactly where to let him walk to and not walk to, and just learning like, okay, we're not going to do this, we're not going to do that. But at first, it was kind of getting a rein on, okay, how do we do what we have to do day to day? But you spend so much time with them when you pick that up, right? He's off today, something's off, something's not right, right? His stool, right, was not the same consistency because he eats the same thing all the time. So you literally have a regimen that's very predictable. So to that point, Felix, it's easier than I would say other, organization, other instances, because you spend so much time with them, you almost kind of know when something is on or off. What would you say, Alexis, on your side?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And that I think ties into sometimes giving days off, right? So when Hope is sick or she doesn't feel well, or if I notice her, she has diarrhea, she doesn't work. And so that is a factor of, how do I go about my day then, or what am I going to do
Mm-hmm.
about my day? But yeah, I think you're completely right. You're so in tune to the dog. That it gets really easy after a while because you know how your dog is feeling, if they're in a good mood, if they're tired, if they're
Mm-hmm.
hungry, if they're getting hungry, if they're getting just some energy.
Yes.
um yeah, but taking care of the dog is it's easy. Yeah, it's easy taking care of the dog. I don't think taking care of a service dog is in terms of actual care is much more than a pet. I mean, you still have to go to the vet with your pets, you still have to feed them, you still have to have toys, you still have to have a bed. But I actually, and interestingly, I actually don't crate Hope at all. She's not a dog that we crate. Um, so it's just about, I think, finding what's best for you. Taking care of the dog is not that
Mm-hmm.
hard. And I think that to say, your dog can be crate trained or kennel trained. So let's say the dog is not working, you have to give them the day off. You can leave them in the crate and continue to go on to work. If you have to go to work or go about your business and do the things that you have to do, um, it, it's something that becomes part of your lifestyle. And I guess
Right.
that's something that we say it's a lifestyle, and that's what you start to live.
Mm-hmm.
um you become accustomed to, like DP said, there's a schedule and a feeding schedule and a bathroom schedule.
Mm-hmm.
uh, and that becomes part of your natural routine. And so when that becomes part of your everyday life of, she eats at 8 and 5 and she goes out at this time and this time, it becomes pretty easy to live with. I don't think that taking care of a service dog is too challenging, except for, I guess, the one caveat I'll give it is obedience. You do have to do obedience continuously with the dog that you don't have to do, I guess, with your pet. So it
Yeah.
does require discipline in that regard.
And that's a good point. So that kind of, we answered these questions. I'm just kind of popping them up. But yeah, that part of the application process is looking at all these different things: exercise, your ability to do things, your financial fitness. Make sure it's a good match, right? Because for some, like, the reality is, depending on what you need, Legend's a very active dog, right? He likes to go and do stuff. He likes to work. I would like to do nothing. So that's a challenge for me, but it's also part of the process of, no, what you need is to get up off your behind and go do that thing. And I would say that even, what's for me a good support system too is sometimes my wife. She's like, you should probably go out now and spend some time with him. And I'm like, woman, I'm busy right now. I don't want to do that. And he's like, he's looking for attention. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
he'll literally will go and get her and be like, nudge, nudge, nudge.
Tell him.
Can you go tell him something? He's not listening. He's ignoring me
Right.
right now. And it's literally like, he came looking for me, and then he's at the staircase like, what do you say?
Hello.
What do
Excuse me.
But that's the reality, right? Like, I saw something on TikTok, which was the labening, right? So it was like a creepy sound, like Labrador retrievers, da, 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 da. And I kid you not, at the end of the day, he does his thing, take off his collar and everything. And sometimes I'm up late, doing some work or whatever, and he just knocks out like, "Look, let me know when you're ready to roll." But he won't go up unless he stays in the same level with me. Sometimes he's like, "All right, I'm tired. I'm gonna leave now." He'll give me like a few, and then one day terrifies the crap out of me because where I sit, I can see the stairway, go up to the top to the upper level, and literally all I see is eyes looking at me. And I promise
Yep.
you, it scared the bejesus out of me because it was
Yep.
like, if this is like the
Yep.
wall, he was like, he's like this, just looking like, so we're gonna do this all night, or you gonna shut it down? And it terrified the lights out of me because I'm not thinking anybody's up. I look up and he's just there looking at me, just like, so TikTok, I gotta get up in a few hours. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, all right, let me shut this down because you scared the crap out of me. But those are the type of things you wouldn't think about because it's not just a crate. Like, there's no crate training. He might go in there just to kind of take a break because he wants to, but that crate gets no use whatsoever because I don't stay in one place. Right? I move around the house. I go places. I do things. He can play with the kids right now, but the minute I get up, he's like, it doesn't matter what happens. I shared on the last live that my wife, for example, he's different with everyone. So with me,
Mhm.
it's not the whole sit on my lap because I'm gonna rub you. Like, none of that crap happens here. He's like, if anything, he's like pushing away, like, okay, rub me, but my paw's on top of you because that's not what I'm here for. Whereas my wife, he literally walks up to her and just plops down and goes, go get, do your thing here, and she'll rub him and do all that stuff. But guess what? The minute I do an inch to move or something, he will flip over and be like, "It's go time, get off me." You know what I mean? The only thing that I can sneak away, from him is food time. If he's eating, I have literally a minute and a
Oh, yeah.
half to get out the house and get something from the garage. Because as soon as he realizes I'm gone, he's over the door looking like, "This is what we do now."
And Hope is super food motivated. If you give her something good to eat, you could murder me. She does not care. See ya. I
Wow,
don't care.
that looks like a hurt. I'll be done in a little bit.
She's like, "Okay, I'll get you in a second, mom.
I'll
I'll be
be
right there.
5 more seconds. All right.
The food is set up."
You mentioned traveling via air. Can service dog be taken except outside the U.S.? So we talked about this, right? That's where we're also doing some research where some places, you may have to take them and quarantine them and have, so for some that might not be an option of like, wait a second, stateside, that's one thing, but Oconus, going to like Hawaii or places, there are restrictions where you have
Yeah,
to look into that.
not even. I mean, yeah, like Hawaii has quarantine requirements that you can get out of and get around. However, you need to have some support. So that's where like Canines for Warriors is very helpful in
Hmm.
terms of paperwork and getting your veterinary stuff like that. I think anybody can get around the quarantine. I think you just have to do the proper paperwork. And doing research into the country. So, for example, I think Canada is really permissible to service dogs coming from the United States. But other countries, I don't know about. It just really depends. So,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
and flying in the United States domestically. Each carrier
Hmm.
has different airline policies. Let's see. How would one travel via plane with a service dog, like accommodating seating? Um, so typically you should indicate beforehand. Some require that you indicate when you're buying your ticket, but certainly I believe it's 48 hours before you fly. And you can request the bulkhead seating, so you get a little bit more
Yeah.
extra of that, a little bit of
which
extra
which
like
comes
space.
into training too, right? Like I've literally gone to empty aircrafts, and to just find out what that even looks like. Trust me, everybody has flown probably, but if you
Yeah,
haven't flown with a dog, trust me, you don't understand anything about space because what you
yeah.
think
Oh God.
you don't know until you realize like this is not going to work. The bulkheads are your friends. Those extra leg rooms definitely. Obviously transiting to the airport, right? And just things you don't think about, right? Like if the gate you're going to is the last gate, well, guess what? You have to go through that entire thing with the service dog, go to the checkpoint, do the security thing. That is a whole thing.
And you may need to get to the pet relief area, so you better hope that's in your
And
terminal.
those are so sanitized and clean.
Yeah, they're gross. Also, and Hope doesn't like them, but I always try
Doesn't
to give
either.
her the opportunity before a flight, just to give her the
And that's
opportunity.
planning, right? So like cutting
Yeah,
food, and this is where again having an organization helps because if I'm going somewhere, right, I can reach out, text Michelle, and ask the question of, okay, here's my flight time. How am I marrying that? Am I cutting food and water so I can make sure that he's good to go before we get there? Those type of things happen. But I think so. One thing I would say also is even knowing where you go. So one benefit on my side that I would say was pretty cool. United Airlines, I would say, is
yeah,
very accommodating. They actually partnered with the organization, so they let us come down to do training and do stuff. And like the
amazing.
one of the managers there, they gave us a card, so if I'm traveling, I can reach out, and they're always very accommodating. So even things like that, where because you're coming with a service dog, if you fly a lot frequently, right, building those relationships with the managers to be able
Mhm.
to expedite some of that, right, getting pre-checks so you don't have to go through certain things. Like those are things
Exactly.
people don't even think about.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Yeah, these are things that you really have to consider. And circling back to the planning, you have to really, really plan. Hope, and she is not that big of a dog. However,
Hmm.
it's a lot of space on an airplane. She takes up a lot of space. I'm not a tall person, so I'm 5'4", and I've been really uncomfortable on flights before because my knees were in my chest, just to make sure that she has room. And that's the other
Hmm.
thing too. You're going to want to make sure your dog is comfortable. So, I've had to. My last time that we flew, I took off my shoes and then I tried so I could rest my feet on her back so that we could both kind of like be, in peace. In the future, I may consider just buying a second seat to have that space. So yeah, you can buy your one seat and be accommodated with your one dog. But there's just different things that you may want to think about in the future. You may want to think about buying a second seat if you just don't want to deal with this, the space issues. Now I'm at a place where I might just buy the second seat if I'm able to, because the
Mm-hmm.
space is it's not fun in economy for sure. And these
Mm-hmm.
are things that they do require a lot of planning. Hotels. What are you going to do when you get to the hotel? Making sure that they don't force you into the pet room.
Mm-hmm.
Not paying your pet deposits and not paying things like that. Um, how to make sure that they know it's an actual service dog when you call to book your flight. They don't think it's an emotional support animal, so that you don't have to provide documentation. Just different things like that. It requires a lot of research and a lot of planning. Um, Gone are the days of just running out the door and leaving. I think now it takes a little bit more of, okay, I have to have food, I have to have water, I have to make sure the hotel is has grassy area to take your dog. That's another thing. You have to make sure that the places you're going to have spaces for you to relieve your animal, right? So there's all these factors and different kind of things that we have to consider.
And that's where the planning piece I think comes uh, is huge. Some comments, I tend to smile, raise my hand a little, tell people he's working, and they stop. When they stop, I say thank you for your consideration and walk by. But it was hard to be assertive with people, especially if that's something you never had to deal with, which is again, some of the points that we touched on earlier. Um, Someone shared and said, I'm on my second service dog, both trained for their first year and a half. Vet for vets in Olympia, Washington. They came to my house for 2 hours, twice a week, 20 years with my dogs. So,
Wow.
you start to see the similarities in different places that we're at. But these are the conversations and questions that people wouldn't even think about to share and talk about. You have some agreements here that kind of came up as far as what you shared. Let's see here. So, and this is a good one here. How does a service dog actually help with mental health? So that really is very veteran specific. It's case specific to the person, and I think that's the uniqueness of a service dog, right? It's trained specifically for you. So for me, I will share, right? And again, I don't purport to be a trainer expert in these things. I'm just a veteran telling his story of how where I'm at in life, right? And Alexis is telling her story. But I will say that that's where I think it's crucial to have that as part of your therapy, right? Your therapist having that conversation. What are the things that you're dealing with? Are there things that they can alert to and they can support, right? There's, deep pressure therapy. There's alerting to certain things. For example, I'm here, I'll do things like this, for example. And one of the many things he can do literally is know for a fact that if I'm sitting here doing this too much or I'm whatever, he'll come and start nudging because he knows, I'm starting to fidget or do something. That's just one thing, for example. And for other individuals, it might be retrieval, right? Look, like doing the laundry, he loves doing the laundry. The way my back is set up and stuff, he has the ability to support and get things. So there's different things that they're trained for specifically because, again, what my service dog may do for me, it's different for Alexis, but that's where the
Yes.
uniqueness come in the training.
But even the practical things you mentioned earlier, DP, like watching your back. So Hope has a command where she can watch my six. Your dog can watch your six. So things like being in an ATM or being in a grocery
Mm-hmm.
checkout, your dog watching behind you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Hope has a command, has a block command, so she can create space between me and the people. So I'll put her right between me and somebody else so
Mm-hmm.
that they can't get that close to me. So
Right.
they've
Or
really
even to go search, for example. Like some folks, quite frankly, can't go into a place without you being triggered of if somebody here. And literally,
exactly
one of the for some, right, your service dog may be trained to literally go in first and scan,
yeah,
and literally they will run in, scan, and come back all clear. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
that for
yeah,
some is going to be enough to let them be able to transit life. So if you're someone dealing with the fact of you may have, let's say, this crippling anxiety, one of the tasks, again, that's why I'm saying it depends on the situation, but one task, just looking at that right there alone, is so powerful for someone who is afraid to go someplace they don't feel safe because of
right.
what they've dealt with. And now at least you have the ability to have that block. You have the ability to be at a urinal and not worry who's going to come behind me because in your mind, someone's going to do something, right? And he's alerting. I'll tell you, I've had people sneak up behind me and I know like I was at a barber shop over here and because I'm with him all the time, I literally hear him begin to growl very low, right? And it's one of those things where I know something's up and it's literally this lady's like kind of creeping up slow, and literally it's like you're creeping. It's not. He doesn't see it as oh you're creeping up on me. It was literally they're creeping up on. I mean on him, on me. So
Hmm.
literally he doesn't. He didn't. He doesn't. It's like almost like an escalation. So yes, it's hard to
Yeah.
explain, but it's one of those things where I just kind of hear like the low little growl intensify, and then he'll bark. And that's one of
Hmm.
those things where I was literally at a barbershop. This lady walks in, same thing, didn't kind of notice it. I kind of look over. He knows that I know. Now we're good to go. But in another instance, he was able to pick up that something was just off, and it was weird. I don't know if you ever seen this, but I can count in one hand how many times he's actually barked. Like, because he doesn't do that
Yeah,
unless it's.
park either.
But literally, this one lady walked in the barbershop and he barks, and I'm, if, immediately I'm like, oh crap, I'm gonna get kicked out of here. I'm going haywire. The whole
Right,
time, everybody in the barbershop first goes, one, when the heck was the dog even here? That's the first
right.
thing. Two, how the heck did he know? That lady is batshit crazy. Every time she comes in here, she starts some stuff. She almost stabbed the guy one time.
Mm,
Like, I'm sitting there like, wait, what? And mind you, it's a barbershop. People are coming, going all day. But the
right.
fact that there was something he picked up in her that was like, not today, Satan. I mean, those are the things that you can't make up. But again, that's just literally, going through life where you having that ability to know that if no one's going to sneak up behind me, right? Or he's able to
Right.
pick up something that's kind of like off.
Or even as simple as alerting you to how you're feeling. So as simple as you feel your escalate, you feel your anxiety escalating and your dog is nudging you. That's a
Mm-hmm.
check for you. Hey, I'm starting to feel not right. What do I need to do to take care of
Mm-hmm.
myself? Do I need to excuse myself from the situation? Do I
Mm-hmm.
maybe need to take medication? Whatever the case may be. And so these are a number of ways in which having a service dog can help your mental health, right? They can help monitor how you're feeling and keep you alert of how you're feeling. They can watch your back. They can create space. They can search for you. They also,
Mm-hmm.
create somebody that you're responsible to and somebody that you get to live for and live with.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many ways that they can. I'd like to. So yeah, I think that's one way in which they can help you. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of different ways, as you said, that you can train them individually, but it's super helpful for me as somebody who is not always the most self-aware about how I'm feeling to have an external
Mm.
indicator for me as well.
And that kind of that's why I brought this one up here because it goes right into that. So where are you at now? Being a little further along, Susan's asked some good questions throughout the evening, and a good question is, I like each of your perspective on how it's helped you so far. Right, we're talking about generalities, but in your journey, and you kind of talked a little bit about it as far as being able to kind of reclaim some things and potentially not needing her for certain other things. But overall, how would you answer this?
Well, to the start of not of being able to do certain things without her was the fact that I wasn't doing anything at all, right? So I
Mm,
was completely isolated. I was completely reclusive. I was not leaving my house, and so having her helped me have both the confidence and the reassurance in going back out and reintegrating back in the world, with a dog that can kind of help support me by, like we said, watching my back, creating space between me and others. Hope also has mobility commands. I don't need her for that, but she, can do those
mm-hmm,
types of things. And helping me feel, comfortable enough and kind of reintegrating in the world. Like I said, we've been to Broadway plays, we've been to soccer games, we've been to, we've been to movie theaters, we've been to all kinds of places. And she really helped me reintegrate back into the world and having that kind of confidence and that support to do that. And so that's been, I think, amazingly impactful because before I was completely isolated and I wasn't doing, anything. But also being more mindful of how I'm feeling and trying to be more mindful of how and what's making me feel the way that I'm feeling, and being more proactive about that. I know we all have our lows, and some of our lows get pretty dark. Having lows that low and that dark is not conducive to being a dog mom either, right? So I have to take my dog out. I have to walk her. That's another way actually in how it's helpful to you because you have to go outside. You have to walk your dog. You have to go get your dog food.
mm-hmm,
So it forces us to be present and engage in the world. And it doesn't let us kind of be reclusive and kind of hide
mm-hmm.
and alienate ourselves from the world as much as we might without these dogs. So yeah, there's like just a host of
And,
ways
and
that
and
they're.
there's a health aspect of just because of the fact that you're not stuck in a house. We were talking about this and last month, and Michelle kind of brought up, there are studies out there where individuals, let's say with animals, tend to have better immune systems or better health, or get sick less. And my first thing is like, what do you mean? But the reality is, it is 20 degrees outside, and guess who's going out there right now? Like you're building up that immunity to go out and do different things that you know if you just didn't, if you just were stuck in the home all day, right? The simple cold will catch you. I can tell you, it makes a lot of sense. You know what I mean? Just because of the fact that you're being exposed to so many different things by virtue of, having to get out of the house and do other things you just mentioned as well.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. um I think it's really important too to always remember that the dog is a tool. It's not the end all be all. It's not going to solve all of your problems. It's not going to, heal everything, but it's a tool that you can use, right, to help better kind of reclaim your life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that it's important to look at it as a tool and not necessarily the end all be all, because things are still challenging when you have your dog. You're still going to face challenges and upset, and it's still going to be you're still going to face some battles, right? But now at least you have somebody to do it with you. And that's, I think, maybe the biggest thing that she's done for me is that ever since having her, I've never felt alone. And I think that that's maybe been one of the biggest and most impactful things, is knowing
Mm.
somebody with me
Talk,
all the
talk,
time.
can you say that again? Because I think that's very powerful for many veterans, especially women, right? Who, again, this is something that you have. Again, we're highlighting it, right? As a woman, you left service. There's a brotherhood, a sisterhood. We have each other's back. As
That's
veterans, we
right.
leave that, and we miss those things. But at the end
We
of the
sure do.
day, I'm not, a bodyguard or anything like that. But as a man, there's certain things that maybe you feel that you can handle, right? Like, I wish somebody would do a thing. But the
Yeah.
reality is, there's also, and it's a question, so I'm not going to try to mansplain it here. My question is for you, leaving service, not being that brotherhood or sisterhood, being in New York City by yourself, right? Like, think of like how that point you made, I think, as a woman not feeling alone. Can you kind of say that again, expound on that? Because I think that's something that, many, like, wouldn't be able to even articulate that need and that solution that Hope has given you.
So, I mean, I am part of a team, right? And I always have my teammate there, somebody to both look out for me and watch my back, but who I am also responsible for and responsible to. And I think, like you said, we kind of miss that camaraderie when we leave the service. We miss that those dynamics that we had of brotherhood and sisterhood, and always having people around who, um, let's be real, we used to always have somebody around who would have our back no matter what. And you lose that feeling when you get out, and it's really isolating. So having Hope here has always been like, just so encouraging and so validating that I have somebody who's going to look out for me and who's going to work hard for me and who's going to always do what she can to make sure that I am okay. And that also creates somebody for me to do the same for. And not being alone and not feeling that isolation is huge. And I think especially when we talk about suicidal ideation in the veteran community, many of us feel so alone. We feel so isolated, and we
Yep.
isolate ourselves even further in those feelings. And so having the service dog who has her own personality, she's like a person. She's
Mm-hmm.
like a human to me, in many ways. Really helps circumvent me feeling like I am by myself.
Mm-hmm. And I think and that's really kind of the reason I asked that question, because you know we know a lot of people and people may be around us, but to understand what someone is going through, it's
Mm.
different, right? Let's talk about suicide, right? Let's talk about the veteran situation that's happening, that this pandemic of so many we're seeing a day, and it's always the same thing, right? Like, I would have never known, I just talked to them. But the fact is, that little interaction with everything that's happening in life, it doesn't suffice to know what's really going on, and to not be alone and have that person with you. Literally, that speaks volumes to the fact that now it's almost like that accountability, right? You have to know for a fact that, hey, she needs me, right? And again, like they say, they say an idle mind is the devil's playground, but there's no
Mhm.
idle time when you have Hope with you. So those moments of despair of, like, what's the sense of? Well, here's the sense of, you got to take me out here a little bit. And as simple as that sounds, that many of us that are veterans tend to be ourselves very task oriented, right? We're very organized in certain things, and having that need of, hey, you're not going to let the man to your left or woman to your right down. That speaks volumes. So that in and of itself, I think, is very powerful to kind of highlight, of not feeling alone and having that companion with you and being part of a team, because that's what you are. You are, a veteran canine team.
Yeah, I think that you hit it on the head, and it's like having that, it's that accountability factor, as you said. Somebody is expecting something from you. They're relying on you for their next meal, for their next break. It's super important, and you're accountable to that person.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for many of us who are just trying to get to the next day, for many of us who are just trying to get to tomorrow, right, or to tonight, or to 6 hours from now, or whatever the case might be, um, having this animal that you are accountable to and responsible for is very, very, very helpful, right? Because you love them, you're responsible for them, and you want to make sure that they have the best possible life. And so I found it so helpful for me in terms of not being suicidal. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think that I've struggled with that since having my service animal, and I can say that I was really struggling before. I'm really struggling before.
Mm. And that's why I brought this up here, where Jaden is my medicine. Says
Hmm.
this veteran relating to their service dog.
Hmm.
That that's it's a real thing. And again, these are the conversations that we talk about the good stuff, but this is also the reality of being in that better place, which goes back to the previous question of where you're at today and where we're at, right? Being able to not be in that negative spot and have something to look forward to and have that responsibility and have that team. It's very powerful. One, thank you for sharing that piece, but I think that many can relate to that, especially those that are out there watching or listening to this, after the fact. I always look at it to say that I'm not better than you. The difference is we understand what those moments look like, right? Being in those dark places. The difference is we just tried and found different things that help for us by having these conversations. Maybe someone might find something new. It might be equine therapy, right? It might be getting a service dog, and maybe it's not getting a service dog. After this conversation, it might be like, you know what, I can't do all that stuff. Good.
Right.
Now you can actually begin to look at other things, but you can make informed decisions.
Yes, which I think is what's most important is making an informed decision, and undertaking this responsibility of having service dogs. Is
Mm-hmm.
It's a responsibility, and it's not all fun and games. And some days you don't really feel like you want to walk the dog, or some days you don't feel like you want uh, to go to the grocery store to get the dog food. But those are just like the things that we have to do, right? And those are the things that keep us going.
Mm-hmm. The question we asked earlier about the equine therapy, I was one of the first cohorts of a new equine therapy for PTSD. Since then, I've probably taught over 200 veterans how to use a horse as a therapy tool. It's very effective for those who have not had success with other therapies, as a horse can tell your truth. No lying to a horse. Big trust issues, so the vet learns to give trust and require trust. I've taken a group to Idaho on a 5 day trail ride pack. It's quite the experience, and that's again that's a conversation I'd love to even have, to talk about, right? Because again, these are the type of things where because we're talking about this now, I want to have a conversation with you. Let's the three of us have a conversation about this because again, it's that this is how you get more information out there. Brian responded. Thanks, Alexis and DP. All the things that go into living in a service dog, and even for someone like me, it's helpful. And I think that's really what it comes down to that we didn't see we had before. Um, let's see here. The question that came up: are you recording this? Yep. Wherever you're watching this, it's going to literally be there. So it's recorded, posted, and will stay online for you to rewatch again. Um, let's see here. We have some different resources. Let's see. Here we go. That's another thing that's hard to get used to. If you have a dog to break, you're isolating. Your dog is always right there, right? To that same
It's
point.
really, yeah. And I think that's another challenge, right? Is so when I in my 3 weeks with Hope, she was with me at all times. The only time that she wasn't like physically like tethered to me with her leash was when I was in the shower. And even when I was in the shower, she was in the bathroom with me. And then 30 days after that, she was still tethered to me at all times, right? And to go from, as we talked about, I'm single, I don't have kids, I haven't been through that experience of having somebody literally tethered to my body all the time. And it was a big adjustment. It was a little bit tough, right? But that's kind of where that bond comes in now too, to where Hope and I have this really strong bond. Is that we were almost, the leash was almost like an umbilical cord. We were together. We went everywhere together. We did everything together. Is that hey, legend?
Yeah, this is the only time where it's like, well, just be yourself now because, he my he went out to do his thing. He's kind of shutting it down, so he's doing his little routines. Uh, we got an FYI that came up here, which I think is good. First seats past the plane entrance has more floor space. FYI, understand the configuration of the type of equipment you're going to be on. Doug, thank you for your service. Marine Corps, 2.5 years, so I got injured. Thank you for tuning in, being with us. Love your profile picture, brother. Um,
Cute doggo.
Yeah. Let's see. My dog blocks people from coming close to me in line, nudges me when I'm getting anxious to get my mind off the panic until I can finish what I'm doing. She stops if I'm being distracted or don't see a car coming. Mine doesn't bark unless something is up. So again, even folks that are in the comment section with service
Yeah,
dogs are sharing some of their own, pieces there, which I think it's huge. Agreed, they can feel the vibes. I totally agree with that. That is a
yes,
true statement. Let's see. Someone says yes. My dog doesn't bark, but if there's one man who lives close by, and whenever he comes around, she barks.
that's an indication. That's all you need to know.
Oh
That,
goodness gracious! Someone said he's an axe murderer. Shit, they know. They know. Um, let's see. And again, I'm just bringing up some of the things that echo what we're mentioning. As far as mental health for me, when my anxiety is heightened, she distracts me by forcing her head under my arm or hand to stop until I pet her. And I will tell you that there are even instances where and it's funny how they can just feel things, right? Like when you're really reality, like his whole demeanor changes. Like I've had instances where I've been really just in not a good place, and he just changes. Like, okay, something's up here, and it like literally he'll try to like nudge himself and get under my arm or do something. If I spend a lot of time on this little machine right here, guess what he does? He's just like,
yes,
and literally he's
yes.
just sitting there like, and I'm like, I'm trying to respond to an email, and because of of course, in my mind, and these are the things you don't think about. It's a mobile device, right? It's an iPhone. However, all they see is you're paying this thing more attention to me. What's going on here? You know what I mean? Whatever you're looking at, this thing is causing you some distress, right? You get an email that pisses you off. You're like, what the heck? You know what I mean? Like you're sitting there, like all he's looking at is I was fine. I picked up this little machine, and all of a sudden, this little round, this rectangular thing is making me
Mhm.
upset. So guess what? Get it away. Get it away. Get it away. That's the bad guy. And just something that simple that you wouldn't think about that happens literally more often than not.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And Hope is just funny. Sometimes I think she's just spiteful, right? So if I'm trying to take a picture, she's like, no, she'll move, she'll bop the camera, she'll do whatever. So there's never any getting away, getting anything around her if she doesn't want to do it. But yeah, I think that they notice, they're very receptive or perceptive of how you're feeling. She definitely knows if I'm upset or if I'm not feeling well. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I did not choose my own dog. Did you choose your dog, BP? I did not. No.
No,
And
they
I
did
think
a temperament test and they were able to kind of just pair it based off what I needed. So I didn't know, until it was just okay, come meet. I got a picture like this is him and go meet him. But
that goes back to trusting the process and trusting the experts. I was paired by an expert, and so that's why I just went with it. I didn't know what at that time. I didn't know what was best for me in terms of a dog. I didn't know about temperament. I didn't know about training or all of those
hmm
types of things. I didn't know what kinds of dogs did what best in what type of environment. Any of those things. So I just got lucky. I knew that I wanted a black dog and I wanted a girl dog. I didn't tell anybody this because I knew
hmm
that I had no control whatsoever over what I got. But I got a black dog and I got a girl dog. So it worked out well. What I will say is that if you go to the right program, you will get the dog that's right for you.
mm. That's very powerful. So got the good compliment there. Let's see here. This was pretty cool too. As the years go on, your union service dog relationship basically will become smooth as butter.
Yeah.
Um, so this is a good question here too, and again, this is we'll bring some of the specialists on board. One of my best friends, he was going to self-train through an organizations. There are many ways.
Mhm.
Some people can train their own service dog. You don't have to go through an organization. Personally, there's no way I could have got to this point by myself. So I am completely glad that I went through an organization. But there are those individuals who can self-train or partner up with an organization where you're kind of taking the lead on that. So it's an option, but not the only option, right? So that's where we're kind of having different ways to get there. On both of our sides, we went through like a veteran, centered oriented group, but that took
Mhm.
some time for, we went through it different ways, but you see kind of how that worked for us. Some I've seen they kind of, are able to get their small puppies, their temperament tested, and if, they choose to go that route, that is an option. So that is possible. But again, that goes down to, are you able to, do that training, keep up with that, because the success rate and failure rates will change based off, having a professional who's done this and can really kind of make the process easier.
Yes, I agree.
Alrighty. So I think we got most of. Someone said, it, "Me too, thank you." Vets for vets. Yeah. So again, these are many organizations. There's a lot of great conversation happening in the chats and kind of going on, and I think really this becomes, as we kind of wrap up, one of many conversations. But literally, we just got kind of to the point of just talking through just um, our journey, how we got here, right? What life looks like. There's so many things that we can unpack of just, a
Hmm.
grocery store. Like one life alone could be just life in a grocery store, right? Life in the mall, and what that all looks like. But really,
Wow.
it's
Oh,
about making it all real for people and answering, and filling those voids for sure. You were gonna say something?
yeah. No, I just the mall is like I
Mm,
haven't been to a mall in forever, but as soon as you said that, I'm just imagining all of the moms with strollers and kids who want to point at you and who want to
goodness
come up and
gracious.
say hello. The mall is maybe one of my least favorite places as a service dog handler. I feel like a little zoo attraction in there, but I do love the mall for training. You get really good training done at the mall. Lots of different stores, lots of different exposures.
Mm,
Hey, legend.
mm-hmm. Yeah. So
I,
one thing I've noticed is if I say, for example, all right, he pretty much has that already locked down. Where like when I'm wrapping something up, he's always like, all right. So as we start to wrap it up, he's just like, well, alrighty, he's wrapping it up because that's the thing. He got about a few more minutes, and if not, you'll start seeing him kind of go, look, you said the word already. It's two-way street. I
yeah,
respond to commands. You have to respond to what I'm happening doing here now.
yeah.
One good question that came in. I'm hard of hearing, so my dog helps me to know what's going on in the home and environment. I feel more secure. Do you have to go through training to have a dog? I thank you for sharing. Again, that goes back to the point where yes, yes and no, right? I think there's a benefit to going to an organization, but really, if the obedience training is there, the good citizen canine training, having the ability to transit the world is key. Because there are rules. It all comes back down to that, right? There's rules at the 8 day places where you have to be able to transit the world without necessarily having a dog that's going all over the place, being unruly, untrained. So there's levels to this, but I would say that there's a benefit to at least partnering with an organization. If you have, let's say, that dog is able to do that for you, they would be able to help you in that journey for that specific thing that you are dealing with. When it comes to if it's a hearing situation or someone who's like sight impaired, if that's your disability and that's what they're trained to mitigate and help support, there's other things that training is invaluable for, which is transiting life, right? Those are the things that you wouldn't know about or think about unless you were actually going to an organization. So the point at hand is, I would say that reaching out to organizations, see what they specialize in is key, because again, it depends on the individual, right? Every organization kind of has a different take on what they're doing. So I would say for sure, it's great to have that support, for sure. Um, Anything on
Yeah,
your point for that?
I think you can owner train for sure. I definitely think that I don't know because I didn't owner train. I definitely think that it's very challenging because, as you said, you need to get your dog to meet a certain standard of public access. But per the ADA, you absolutely can owner train your own dog. I don't know the best way to go about that. My assumption would be that it'd be a significant investment in terms of getting adequate training to get your dog to the level that it would need to be at.
Hmm. Yeah,
But you
and
can
that,
do it.
and that goes also to just how trained are you, right? Some folks out there are they have a training background, they're able to get their
But
dog to that level, whereas others maybe can partner with an organization to at least be monitored as they're self training, and you go to training every so often, and is that something that's sponsored to the VA or sponsored to the organization, or are you paying into that to kind of get that training? Because when it's all said and done, all rules and everything aside, when you're transiting the world, you have to know for a fact that you know how to be able to handle the service dog and they can transit that world, because it's like kids, if they have no home training, you know what, let's just call it what it is. That whole like trying to be like in Walmart losing your mind, no, there's no home training here, and that's a big
mhm.
difference. And that's sadly what's happening with like emotional support dogs, where many individuals are getting a bad rap because people just want to put a vest on their little doggy because they bought something online and they can just buy a trained dog. It doesn't work that way. This is as we've talked about, a very exhaustive process. But even for the emotional support animal side of the house, there's a lot of issues that they're dealing with because people just want to slap a vest on something to make it look like what it isn't, and then they're sitting there causing ruckus and all that stuff. And it's like, oh no, they're having a bad day. Well, first of all, what do you mean this dog's here barking or pissing around Home Depot or losing? Like those are the type of things that make it hard hard for individuals like myself because then I'm self conscious. Like I don't want to go here because I don't want to be labeled or looked at a certain way. And so it's like, well, first of all, we're not in that
Mhm.
category. But that's the reality of what's happening with many now who are trying to pass off
Yeah.
their pets as service animals or emotional support animals.
Yeah, there's a proliferation of fake service and emotional support animals, and it is a big problem. And I just kindly ask that those of you who have animals that are not service animals to not participate or engage in behaviors that are supposed to be exclusive to those with service animals. It really does
Hmm.
make our lives much harder. And it really does put people like DP and I in positions to be questioned by people who really shouldn't be questioning us, all because somebody brought their chihuahua to the wrong store and said it was a service dog and it got crazy. So yeah, it's frustrating, and I wish that there were, and I think that there will be. I know Canines for Warriors is for sure working on legislation to make sure that there are different standards of accreditation to ensure that when we see service dogs out here in the public that there are meeting the standards of public access.
And that's a good point there that was brought up. So, uh, yes, you can be asked to leave if your dog's not having a good day. They can ask you to leave because you are causing a scene, or what have you. And again, this doesn't necessarily mean that your dog barks once and that's an issue. That could be that dog alerting to get help that maybe you need something. So there's different things that may be at play here. But I wanted to just at least bring up here this point, which is when we look at, for example, this being here from the ADA itself, right? So here, this is straight from the rule book, right? Overview and all these different things, how to define it. But things that we're looking at here is, the service dog must be under control, right? This is straight from the laws here, right? What can they ask specifically, right? Is a dog a service animal with disability? What work or task has the dog been trained to do, right? Staff cannot ask about the person's disability. They can't require medical documentation, require special identification cards. So regardless of what the internet says, you're not sitting there, getting a little card or training documentation for the dog or ask that the dog demonstrate its ability to prove that they are, right? That's not how that works. So these are the type of things where, again, understand, and then, of course, the miniature horse part, which I always find hilarious,
Yep.
which is in the ADA as well.
I
But
haven't seen one in real life yet. I
I have
have seen a
not, but
great,
I do want to see one.
I mean, not a greyhound. I did see a Great Dane, a real Great Dane,
Hmm.
as a service dog. So it was massive. But I have not yet seen a real life miniature
Hmm.
horse service animal, but I would love to see that. Um,
But this is a good point here too, right? And this, again, this is just going. Again, we're not sitting here giving a legal review of something, but allergies or fear of dogs are not valid reasons for denying access or refusing service to people using a service animal. Again, this is now
and
going
people don't
into
have to
places
admit
where
that.
someone's like, I don't want to say to that lady, she shouldn't be here. I have out. Okay, well, that sounds something to me like you might want to go move somewhere else because I'm not moving, right? A person with disability cannot be asked to remove his or her service dog from the premises unless the dog is out of control, to the point that was just made, and the handler does not take effective action to control it, or the dog is not housebroken. When there is a legitimate reason to ask that a service animal be removed, staff must offer the person with a disability the opportunity to obtain goods and services without the animal's presence, right? And that sometimes, your dog can be having a bad day, right? They could get a case of diarrhea. Like, life happens. That doesn't mean, that that's not a thing, but this is part of the issues where you see those that are not trained to transit the world and deal with this, right? Establishments that sell prepared food must generally allow service animals in public areas, even if state or local codes prohibit it. And that's where now self-advocating to know, like, I get what you think you should do, but this doesn't apply to me here. I don't care if there's 5 dogs outside. This is us coming in here to take care of business, right? If the business, for example, to the point you made, such as the hotel, normally charges guests for damage that they cause, a customer with disability may also be charged for damages caused by him or her animal if they're not trained. Staff are not required to provide care or supervision for your service animal, right? It's not like, yeah, I'm here to take care of this, I'll be back. So, again, these are the different things where the more you verse yourself, it just really helps to understand what the laws are, what the ADA actually, provides for that. So, just to answer some of the questions that we kind of, talked about earlier. But yeah, this is the ADA.
Yeah, and it's super important to be well versed in that because you will have to advocate for yourself. That's just inevitable. So it's very important to be well versed in that.
Yes. Let's see here. And these are just the last few ones that came in. One thing I had to learn is the common person does not have the right to stop me and challenge me about my service dog. Doorman, security manager, staff. No, that's not how that works. Not everybody just doesn't get a pass to talk to me or ask me certain questions because you're not a gatekeeper. Let's see. Have you
So
ever had an issue where you get more attention because you're walking around with a service animal? I see it being an issue with PTSD and unwanted attention. Yep.
yeah. Yes. Yes. That's actually probably your first several months of having a service dog is dealing with the unwanted attention and learning how to manage that.
And I think this is a good kind of point here to end on a positive note for encouragement. I have a service dog in training for I have a dog in training for service dog duties, and we'll be taking a test in a month, and that aspect scares me. And I would say, really believing in the training you have, right? I think it's more the person. The legend, right, learns and is able to pick up and do so many things. It's incumbent upon me to be able to do my part, right? That's where the training aspect comes in, right? You have to trust your training because really it's you, right? He's gonna pick up or she's gonna pick up if you're the one that's not unsure, right? You have to really own the fact of what you're doing. So I would say for the testing aspect, it could become obviously, stressful, right, to do your public access test. But these are the things you
Mhm.
train for. This is, what the dog is trained to do. You have to be confident in the fact that you're doing this here, because again, that's really the hardest part for many. It's just kind of owning that, where it's like, okay, we're gonna do this, but after you're done, it's just like, okay, that wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, because actually it's life that's harder than the test. The test is
Right.
easy, life not so much. What do you think? What on your side, Alexis, for that
Yeah,
comment
so I mean,
question?
in training, we built up to the public access test. That was the last thing that we did, and so we had 3 weeks of build up to that. And of course, that was the one thing that we all were like, "Oh my goodness, oh my goodness!" We were so scared, so anxious. We thought we were going to fail. You're going to be fine. You just have to believe in yourself, believe in your dog, rely on your training. And it's going to be okay. And worst case scenario is you need a little bit more training. That's it. So hang in there. The test is not, and the other thing is the test is not that hard. If you've been training, you should be prepared for it. So just rely on that and have some confidence, believe in yourself, believe in your dog, and you're going to be fine. You're going to do great.
Yeah, and that's really what I would say is the key here. So, all things said and considered, I'm really glad that we were able to have this conversation. I think there's a lot of good information for those. What I would say, like I've always said, is if you see this, I would ask, hey, give it a like, give it a thumbs up, follow on YouTube, because it's not about saying, hey, get more people to see this. It's about we need the right people to see this. And the
That's
systems are the
right.
systems. So share this video with someone. The reason we're pushing it to YouTube because it's easier for many, right? We have, Vietnam veterans that they may well need a service dog. And these are the conversations of our lives to be able to explain that and show the contrasting ways that we're living our lives to be able to answer those questions, because sometimes you just don't have that information readily available. And again, this doesn't replace or constitute that you should not still talk to your therapist. You should not reach out to a reputable organization. But if you have questions, reach out to us. Put a comment below on this, because really it's about creating the community to have these conversations and share the information for those that may need it, so at least they make
Mhm.
better informed decisions. This is the type of conversation or information I wish I had access to when I was going through this, because I searched near high and low, and some stuff is good, some stuff's not so much. But this is the information I wish I had access to listen to when I began my journey. So hopefully this helps somebody else or encourages somebody else as they begin to go through their journey. What would be something that you would say, Alexis, in closing, for those that may be out there, I guess advice or tips for those that may be interested in going down this path or may, kind of are on the fence?
I would say, I guess number one, I would say if you're able to seek out those who have service dogs and have an honest conversation with them, if you're able, find DP or myself on the social medias, reach out, ask questions, get on Clubhouse, host a room, get in a private a private group in Facebook and ask a question. Contact these organizations and ask questions. Reach out. But as they say, closed mouth doesn't get fed. And I think it's really important too that you seek out this information because it exists. It's just not yet packaged in a way that's super friendly for those of us who are looking at. But seek out that information because it's there. This can really be a beneficial, life changing tool for you to use. And I definitely recommend that if you're interested in it, you seek out those resources, you do your research, and you see where you can find a program that works for you.
Yes. And that's that's the same thing that I would echo for those that may be out there. Would be pretty much to do your homework. See what's available out there. Ask the questions. This is meant to say ask and talk to us, right? In the world, sometimes you might not be able to reach out to us and talk to us as we're transiting, but we're creating this medium to have this conversation, to be able to have you all reach out and kind of make a point to have this. So really just ask a question. That's what this is all about. So don't feel that any question might be too weird or crazy. That's why we kind of talked about, being in the bathroom, right? Going to the mall, life with kids, because it breaks down things in a tangible way to make informed decisions. And above all things, as veterans, just try something else. It's not just about popping a pill or whatever you're given. Own your
Right.
therapy, own your journey, own your healing. And this may well be a tool for some. And if not for you, maybe for somebody else who you might say,
That's
you know
right.
what, they may benefit from this. Take a look at what these guys were talking about, right? And again, it's just information. That's where the power comes in. So I really just thank those that tuned in. Definitely, we'll come back and talk more about this. Any questions you have, put them in the comments. We'll come back and answer them as well. Whatever becomes themes, we'll come back and answer them as well afterwards. So, Jesus, thank you for your questions. Thank you, DP Alexis. This was extremely helpful for me. Now I can build a plan from speaking with my mental health therapist and take it from there. If for nothing else, we accomplished this for Jesus, it was
Yes.
worth it, and that's really the honest to God's truth here. Tina, thank you. This was much needed topic and discussions. Thank you for having this. One of many, and again, this is what I wish we would have had. So thank you so much for that comment and sharing that. So with that being said and done, I appreciate all of you. We'll be back soon. From me, thank you for your service. Look out for your strong friends. It's crazy out there, but we have to watch each other's six. Alexis, thank you for joining. Thank you for hanging out this evening, and we'll have to do this again for sure.
Definitely, definitely. I look forward.
So, from DP and Legend, we are out of here, and from Alexis and Hope, they are out of there as well.
Bye.